Chapter 324. Half an hour later, in another dressing room, Dien Ryan was sitting on a chair with excitement and nervousness, allowing the makeup artist to quickly touch up her eyebrows and hairstyle. Several staff members were circling around her, and Eric, who was at the periphery, was giving pointers to the makeup artist from time to time. This situation made Dien Ryan realize that she was really going to get the female lead role in Basic Instinct. Although the scale of this movie was a bit too big, it would definitely have a great impact on her screen image in the future. However, this was Eric Williams' movie. Although Eric was not the director and was only the producer, his name was Eric's screenwriter. No one would think of this movie as someone else's work. Thinking of the female leads who had become famous because of Eric's movies, Dien Ryan could not help but feel a little excited. "Mr. Williams, do you think this is okay?" The stylist quickly swept Dien Ryan's face with a brush, then straightened up and asked. Eric walked in front of the girl, looked at her carefully, and shook his head. "No, the eyebrows need to be thicker and straighter. The lips are too sexy. I don't want that. Do you want it to be more masculine?" The stylist asked tentatively. "Of course not. The female lead must be a woman, but not a sexy one." The stylist frowned and thought for a while. As the best stylist in the industry, he had seen all kinds of weird requests from many famous directors. Therefore, he did not feel impatient with Eric's words. After a while, the stylist quickly retouched Dien Ryan's face. The girl's eyebrows were thicker, and her sexy upper lip was lightly touched up. After finishing, the stylist looked at Eric again tentatively. Eric nodded slightly, then looked behind him. "Have you cut out the clothes I just drew?" "Right away," a staff member answered. 3 minutes. "Hurry up," Eric shouted, then looked at Dien Ryan. "Mr. Tang Johnson will be here later. I need you to perform a few more scenes. Go and get ready." Diane Lane carefully stood up, as though he was afraid of messing up his newly styled hairstyle. He nodded and took a few pages of lines from the staff. He walked to the sofa in the corner and sat down. He quietly flipped through them as the noisy crowd around him couldn't help but lower their voices. "Mr. Williams, the clothes are ready." The assistant brought over a white dress and showed it to Eric. "Is it okay?" "It's okay." Eric took it, walked to the sofa, and handed the dress to the girl. He said to Dien Ryan, "Go and change. Wear this dress and experience Catherine Chumey's mentality. Although you have a good chance, if the effect is not good, I don't mind changing." "No problem." The girl nodded. Although Eric's invitation for a vacuum audition was a little awkward, the girl didn't refuse. She took the clothes and walked to the fitting room. "You just said that you like men to use their hands, didn't you?" Tang Johnson asked aggressively. Dien Ryan had a faint confident smile on his face. He calmly retorted, "No, I like Johnny to use his hands. I don't make rules, Nick. I like to let nature take its course." "You killed Mr. Bartz, right?" An assistant read out the line. The girl leaned forward and said with slight mockery, "I'm not stupid enough to kill someone with the method in my book and then announce that I'm the murderer." "I'm not an idiot. We know you're not that stupid. Maybe that's how you can get away with it. Write a book as an excuse," Tang Johnson said again. Dien Ryan immediately looked at Tang Johnson with a smile. "Of course, that's good," the girl said with a smile, but she quickly became serious, as if what she had said was just a joke. She looked at the people opposite her and said, I didn't kill him." "Did you take drugs with Mr. Bartz?" "Of course." "Which kind?" "Keika, Nick. Have you smoked keika before?" The girl looked at Don Johnson again and asked calmly. After that, the scene was silent for a moment. The scene in Basic Instinct that people love to talk about appeared in the audition room. Dien Ryan was clearly in the zone. She couldn't help but follow the script that she had just read and changed her legs. Jeffrey, who was sitting opposite her and drinking water, saw the scene in front of him and immediately spat out the water in his mouth. With this interruption, Dien Ryan was also out of character. She raised her hand to cover the corner of her skirt, but there wasn't much embarrassment on her face. Instead, she looked boldly at Eric, who was sitting opposite her. Eric must have seen under her skirt just now. Eric coughed twice. He was very satisfied that Dien Ryan could completely let go. Therefore, Eric quickly said, "Very good. Congratulations, Ms. Dien Ryan. You've passed the audition. Thank you for your recognition, Mr. Williams. I will definitely work hard." The girl straightened up and thanked him in a reserved manner. Eric nodded and then said to Roger Spottywood, "Since the female lead has been confirmed, I will rush to New York tomorrow. This movie will be handed over to you and Jeffrey. According to the normal shooting schedule, this movie will take 3 months to complete, but I hope you can reduce the production period to 2 months. Because the movie will be released in 3 months, we need to reserve a month for publicity." "I'll try my best." Roger Spottywood nodded. "I don't want to hear words like, 'try your best.' I need a 100% guarantee. The budget of this movie can be increased appropriately. What I need is to complete it on time and ensure the quality of the movie." Roger Spottywood felt a sense of pressure, but when he thought of Eric's movie, he still had to complete Ghost first. It was said that the movie still needed special effects, but Basic Instinct didn't need them. He had been in Hollywood for so many years. He couldn't be worse than a young man. "I promise, I will complete it on time," Roger Spottywood said quickly without hesitation. Eric nodded and reached out to shake hands with Roger Spottywood. He said, "This is also something I have to do. Roger, I wasted a few months at the beginning of the year. I have to rush back and show some people that they can't hinder me at all. So, if you can finish this movie, we can definitely continue to cooperate in the future." Chapter 325. After confirming the female lead, he had a small meeting with the creator of Instinct to finalize some miscellaneous matters. It was already past 7 in the afternoon. Eric was about to leave when he remembered that there was a woman in his office. Eric pushed open the office door and walked in. The little woman who was sitting on the sofa, absent-mindedly flipping through the magazine in front of her, was startled. Seeing that it was Eric, she breathed a sigh of relief. At this time, all the lights in the office were turned on. The wall lamp, the ceiling lamp, and even the desk lamp on Eric's desk were turned on. "Why do you turn on so many lights?" Eric asked casually and walked to the desk. "No, nothing." Joanna Pakula hurriedly stepped forward and turned off the desk lamp on the desk. Then, she quickly went to turn off the wall lamp. The office suddenly became much darker. Seeing Joanna Pakula turn off the lights, Eric quickly understood that the reason why the girl turned on so many lights was because she was insecure. Maybe she was afraid of being alone. While feeling pity for her, Eric's tone also became gentle. "Sorry, Miss Pakula, for keeping you waiting so late. But I really have a lot of things to do." Joanna Pakula shook her head. "It's okay. Anyway, I have nothing else to do. How about I don't go to your place tonight? It's too late now," Eric said. The girl's insecure behavior just now made him feel guilty, as if he was taking advantage of her. "No, it's not too late. It's only past 7, Joanna Pakula said a little anxiously. Although she inevitably realized something in her heart, the girl instinctively did not want to give up this opportunity. She had had enough of these uncertain days, and the young man in front of her was obviously able to help her end all of this. She did not ask for too much. She just wanted to settle down and not be like before, where she did not get any roles for the longest period of 3 years. She had to rely on temporary jobs to make a living. In that case, let's go. Eric did not refuse. When they arrived at the parking lot, Eric did not drive his own car. Instead, he sat directly in the passenger seat of Joanna Pakula's car. The woman looked at Eric, who was fastening his seatbelt, took a deep breath, and started the car. "I didn't expect you to live in North Hollywood. My home used to be nearby, so it should be in the north," Eric said after entering Joanna Pakula's small apartment. Speaking of which, the original apartment in North Howley had been sold. However, the mansion in Beverly Hills was not sold. It was used as another residence. Although there was a property tax every year, the property tax in North America could offset part of the personal income tax, so it was not too much. Joanna Pakula said, Actually, I just moved here not long ago. I used to live in the city, but I moved here after earning some money from that movie last year. Eric shrugged slightly and did not say anything. Obviously, the woman's previous situation was not very good. The city center of Los Angeles was not as prosperous as the city center of the country in his previous life. Instead, it was a very chaotic community. The Beverly Hills area had the best security in Los Angeles, and the downtown area had the worst security. Mr. Williams, you take a rest first. I'll go and make dinner. It won't take long. Joanna Pakula pointed to the small sofa in the living room and said. Well, just call me Eric, Eric said as he took off his coat casually and hung it on the hanger at the entrance. Okay, Eric. My friends call me Joan, Joanna Pakula said as she walked to the kitchen. Eric looked around the small apartment. It was one bedroom and one living room. The decoration and furniture were quite simple. There was a sofa in the middle of the living room. In front of the sofa was a small TV cabinet. Behind the sofa was a small dining table against the wall. There were a few photos hanging on the wall. Eric leaned over to take a look. Some of them were probably stage stills from Shakespeare's plays. Joanna Pakula looked very young in the photos. Thinking back to the woman's time in the Polish National Theatre, these photos should be from that time. These photos should be from more than 10 years ago. However, in comparison, the current Joanna Pakula did not look much different from more than 10 years ago. Compared to the Westerners who aged easily, the woman's appearance showed that she wanted to enjoy God's favor. After walking around, Eric walked to the small TV and saw a VCR under the TV cabinet. There were a few videotapes next to it. Eric casually flipped through them and saw a movie called Kiss. The introduction said that it was a horror film. Half of the woman's face on the poster was made into a skeleton with thick red lipstick. She did not look like the woman who was busy in the kitchen at all. Putting the videotape into the VCR and turning on the TV, Eric sat back on the sofa. The scene began with the parting of a divorced family. A mother and a daughter boarded a train that was going far away. But on the train, the mother's evil spirit acted up. But the evil spirit in the mother's body spread to the daughter and she died. The daughter sneaked off the train and disappeared. More than 10 years later, the sister who grew up with the father had a family and the daughter was an adult. But because the mother took off the protective cross and gave it to the daughter, the sister died in a sudden car accident. The sister, who had never shown up, appeared at the sister's grave and met the sister's husband and daughter. After only watching for half an hour, Eric could almost foresee the result. There was a slight sound behind him. Joanna Pakula had appeared in the living room without him noticing. She stood quietly behind Eric and stared at the TV screen in a daze. I don't like this movie, Eric said as he stepped forward to turn off the VCR and change the channel. The woman did not answer, but the sadness in her eyes could not be concealed. If she had a choice, she would definitely not accept such a movie. Eric, let's eat, the woman said after a moment of silence. Well, let me help you. Eric got up and followed Joanna Pakula into the kitchen to help the woman put the simple dinner on the table. I don't have any ingredients here. This is all I can do, Joanna Pakula explained. Eric scooped a small bowl of corn soup for himself. After tasting it, he nodded and praised, It's very good. I like it very much. Joanna Pakula looked at the somewhat shabby dishes on the table and regretted. If she had known, she would have taken Eric out to eat. In fact, it would not have cost too much. Although the man kept praising her, she was still very unconfident and her smile was very forced. Chapter 326. Although Eric tried his best to liven up the atmosphere was slightly awkward because of the girl's absent-mindedness. After dinner, Eric looked at the girl who was quietly cleaning up the tableware. After thinking for a while, he stood up and said, Joan, it's getting late. I think I should go back. You didn't drive here. How are you going to go back? The girl looked up at Eric and asked casually. It was not easy to find a taxi in this area. Joanna obviously knew that too. Eric coughed awkwardly. When he was about to call someone to pick him up, Joanna Pakula suddenly said, Can you watch TV for a while? Eric's expression changed. He nodded slightly and sat back on the sofa obediently. The girl cleaned up the tableware and then went into the bathroom. The small apartment had poor soundproofing. Eric could clearly hear the sound of running water. His heart suddenly throbbed strangely. After a while, the girl walked out of the bathroom in a pink bathrobe. Her wet hair was loose. She turned off the light in the living room. Suddenly, there was only the flickering light of the TV in the living room. Eric watched the girl turn off the TV in silence. After a while, the girl leaned over and said softly, "I've heard about you." Huh? Eric felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. He subconsciously asked in confusion. Joanna's voice was a bit low. "About you, that's all I have. My request is not high." The sunlight was blocked by a slightly tall building outside the window. It barely squeezed through the gap and squeezed into the narrow bedroom through the curtains. Although it was not too big and made Eric feel a bit uncomfortable, the faint fragrance of a woman lingering in the room combined his feelings very well. Most women's rooms could make people feel a trace of natural warmth. At least, that was what Eric had seen before. A tuft of light brown hair leaned in front of him. The woman was actually very tall, only less than 10 centimeters shorter than Eric. However, at this moment, she curled up in front of Eric like a little girl. Eric could clearly feel the faint warmth of the girl's breath. Eric could clearly feel the woman's insecurity from her posture. Eric wondered if he should get up now. His watch was on the dressing table next to him. He was afraid that his movements would wake the girl up. Because he didn't take it, he didn't know what time it was. However, looking at the sky outside the window, even though the sun was blocked, it was still bright. Eric was very sure that it was definitely not early now. He did not bring his mobile phone with him. Although Motorola had provided him with several microtacs, which were only slightly larger than the palm of his hand, compared to the mobile phones in his previous life, they were still very clumsy, and he did not like to carry them. Many people were probably looking for him anxiously. Joanna Paku, who was in his arms, moved and opened her eyes. She felt that she was curled up in a man's arms. After a short period of confusion, she quickly remembered what had happened last night. "Eric, what time is it?" The girl raised her head and asked timidly. Seeing that the girl had woken up, Eric felt relieved and took a look at his watch. "It's 9:40. Do you want to rest for a while more? It's already so late." The girl sighed and shook her head. However, she was not in a hurry to get up. She rested her head on Eric's arm and blinked her beautiful peach blossom eyes at Eric. "You don't want to get up?" Eric asked curiously. The girl shook her head, and her eyes were a little confused. "It's not that I don't want to. I just don't know what to do after I open my eyes every day." "That's not good. Without a goal, it's easy to get old." "Oh, I'm indeed much older than you," the girl said disappointedly. Eric comforted her. "You look about the same age as me, at most 25 years old." Joanna smiled and said, "But after all, I'm not 25 years old. Even if I can fool others, I can't fool myself." Eric kissed the girl's lips and said with a smile, "Okay, let's not talk about these sad things." "Yes, Alan, of course I'm fine. I'll go to the airport on time in the afternoon. Go to Malibu and ask someone to help me pack some luggage. Yes, there are people there. You'll know when you get there. Also, buy another ticket." After putting down the phone, Eric looked at the woman who was already dressed neatly. "Come to New York with me. I've already asked someone to buy a ticket." Joanna Pakula was a little hesitant. "You're going to shoot a movie. What am I going to do?" "I've already thought of a position for you. Be my personal assistant." "Personal assistant?" the girl asked in return. After thinking about it, she nodded. "Okay, up to you. I have nothing to do in Los Angeles anyway." "But what about my agent?" "What do you think of your agent?" Eric asked. "He's okay," Joanna said reluctantly. In fact, most agents in Hollywood were very practical. When a star had no potential, the agent would quickly give up on the star. Eric shook his head. Don't use such an uncertain tone. What I mean is, if you think he's good, you can keep him. If not, you can fire him. Without much thought, Joanna Pakula quickly said, then, let's fire him. That's it, Eric said with a smile. If you call him now, he'll be fired. Then you'll be free. We'll go to New York. Joanna was already a little hesitant. But, personal assistant? Eric stepped forward and exposed the girl's waist. Why? You don't want to? No, I'm just a little scared, the girl said with flickering eyes. Scared of what? Joanna Pakula hesitated and closed her eyes slightly. I'm scared that you just want to play with me. When you're tired of me, you won't care about me anymore. Eric pretended to be angry and said, Do you think I'm that kind of person? It's precisely because I don't know that I'm scared. I just want to settle down. You're the big boss of Firefly. Just help me arrange a movie and stabilize my career in Hollywood. This is not a high request. I promise I won't pester you in the future. If you want, you can still come to me. After hearing the girl's nervous words, Eric hugged her tightly in his arms. Don't worry. You definitely won't be like this in the future. Although you don't believe me, I still promise you that you'll definitely become a big star in Hollywood. In my next movie, I'll let you be the female lead. Chapter 327. In late April, Firefly's 3 movie projects were launched almost at the same time, and the schedule was set for this year's summer. This move violated the normal release cycle of many movies. After all, many Hollywood movies in this era were generally released after a few months to more than a year after production. Therefore, many media outlets questioned Eric's arrangement. However, Eric did not respond to these comments, because Firefly was still very different from the 7 major film companies in terms of operation. After all, Firefly was still a lot smaller than the 7 major film companies. For the major film companies, they had to arrange the release of dozens of movies a year. Of course, some movies would be repeatedly delayed due to various conflicts, but Firefly was different. After the merger with New Line, Robert Shea had suspended the New Line's low-budget production plan. Therefore, Firefly only had 3 movies to arrange for the release of in the first half of the year, which included The Silence of the Lambs, Sleeping with the Enemy, and Ghost. Basic Instinct was being distributed by Universal, so Firefly did not have to worry about it at all. As for Ghost, it was being distributed in cooperation with Disney. Under such circumstances, Firefly's distribution pressure was even lower, and it was easier to operate. Almost at the same time as the movie was being produced, they could start simple promotional work. By the time the movie was released, the publicity had already been going on for 3 months. Compared to the major film companies, which only had a month's publicity time, Firefly's publicity was very sufficient. At the same time as the movie was being filmed, Eric's The Matrix, which was only about 50,000 words, was also quietly sold on the shelves. Michael Klaus spent almost no effort on publicity, and the book easily climbed to the top of the bestseller list. After all, this book had been written too hastily. Eric had only spent a little over a week on it, and many of the details were not considered completely. It was more like he was narrating a lot of specious but actually wrong segments. Therefore, many newspapers criticized Eric's book, saying that although it had an ingenious idea, the details were completely shoddy. It was simply fooling the readers. Some newspapers even criticized Eric for being a money grubber. Even the readers who didn't like this book laughed it off. With Eric's current net worth, why would he care about some insignificant royalties? Of course, many people in Hollywood realized Eric's real purpose for writing this book. Compared to the previous Jurassic Park and Resident Evil, this novel was obviously geared towards the movie industry. Moreover, after carefully studying this novel, many people realized that The Matrix had great potential in the movie industry. Even though they knew that the chances were slim, there was still a constant stream of people contacting the film rights. Even Cameron, who was preparing for Terminator 2, became very interested in the novel. He even called New York to discuss some of his views on The Matrix with Eric. Of course, Cameron was tactful enough to not mention the film rights in the end. Eric also had no intention of letting Cameron direct The Matrix. Although the idea was very tempting and interesting, The Matrix was very different from Cameron's film style. Cameron's films were not lacking in thought. For example, the Terminator series could be said to express a strong concern about mankind's endless expansion of nuclear armaments. In the previous world, Avatar expressed a strong concern about mankind's endless plundering of natural resources through the story of the alien race, the Na-6, defending the planet Pandora. In the end, it expressed a strong concern about mankind's endless plundering of natural resources and the possibility of a strong backlash from nature. However, although there was some thought, Cameron's films had always pursued the most gorgeous visual effects and the most explosive scenes. These were not the main focus of The Matrix. The storm caused by The Matrix continued. No matter what the outside world said, Eric was not affected at all. The shooting of Ghost was carried out in an orderly manner in all districts of New York. Stan, the Grim Reaper I need is a real Grim Reaper with a black cloak and a scythe in his hand, not a few blurry shadows. But according to what you said, the final effect is likely to be a few shadows. Night had just fallen in New York. On a closed street, the crew was busy preparing for the early stages of filming. Eric and Stan, who was in charge of the special effects, were discussing something. Right, speaking of shadows, this is a big problem. Sam has become a ghost, so according to common sense, he shouldn't have a shadow in the end, and he shouldn't have footsteps when he walks. The footsteps are easy to solve, but what about the shadows? Stan pondered for a moment and said, "That's easy. Use shadowless lights, and then adjust the lighting in post-production. But this will be very troublesome to shoot." "I'm not afraid of trouble, as long as you can do the details well," Eric said decisively. At this time, the set supervisor in charge of the set came over and told Eric that everything had been arranged. A few extras wrapped in blue tights came to Eric and Stan. These people were the terrifying Grim Reapers that appeared in the movie. However, not only were they not scary, they looked a little funny. Stan and Eric went up together and personally checked the extras' costumes. "Eric, I don't think the Grim Reaper needs to be too realistic. If it's too realistic, it will become a horror movie. So, a few shadows are just right." "No, Stan, I'm talking about realistic effects, not terrifying effects. If the Grim Reaper is realistic, wouldn't it be scary?" Stan asked with some difficulty. Eric shrugged helplessly. "You just need to do it according to the effect I want. I'll take care of the rest." Stan shrugged. "Okay, as you wish. Actually, this has to do with post-production rendering. The rendering farm for the digital domain hasn't been set up yet. Then we'll borrow Pixar's. They have a ready-made rendering farm. Although it's used to render 3D animation, I remember that the principle is similar. You can talk to John Lasseter. If it doesn't work, we'll borrow Industrial Light and Magic's." Eric and Stan finished checking the extras and made an okay gesture to the assistant director. Then, filming began again. Chapter 328. This was the scene where the villain who killed Sam, Willie Lopez, was frightened by Sam's ghost and ran out of the old Mather apartments in a panic. He was then accidentally killed on the street. For such a small role, Eric did not bother to find the original actor. Instead, the casting director chose a Latino actor in his 30s named Philip Reed. The scene where Willie was hit by the truck was also quite dangerous. Therefore, even though Philip Reed was only a small role, he still had to be upgraded. Otherwise, if Philip Reed was accidentally injured, the crew would have to change the actor at the last minute. "Stan, are you ready?" Eric walked up and asked. "Of course, I promise there won't be any problems." "Get ready." Stan Winston gestured that he was ready. Eric returned to the monitor and looked around again. After confirming that there were no problems, he shouted, "Action!" A red car and another truck drove toward each other. In the shot, Willie, played by Philip Reed, looked terrified and forgot to dodge. In the other camera, the two cars crashed into each other with a bang. Good, one shot. Special effects crew, get ready. Hey you two, help Mr. Reed to the side to rest, Eric said with a sigh of relief. No accidents, very good. Philip Reed, who was standing next to the two colliding cars, was so scared that he went limp. He had to be helped down by two staff members. Although the stunt staff had repeatedly assured him that there would be no problems, and that there would be no danger at all from where Philip Reed was standing, it was inevitable that he would feel timid when he saw the two cars colliding next to him. However, it was impossible to use a stunt double for this frontal shot. After Philip Reed left, after some simple preparations, a special effects crew member dressed exactly like Philip Reed walked out and stood in the gap between the two cars. He had a wire hanging from his body and was ready to shoot the scene where Willie was hit. This shot was quite difficult. In order to avoid being exposed, the special effects crew member had to land face first after flying up. Therefore, the special effects crew member's face was covered with protective gear. Although the person in charge of the stunt was an experienced stunt technician from Stan Winston's studio, it still took him 7 or 8 tries to get it right. The stunt technician also endured falling down 7 or 8 times in a row. After all, it wasn't easy to land face first. After completing these 2 scenes, the rest of the shoot went a lot smoother, including the scene where Willie's soul was dragged away by the Grim Reaper. Actually, it was just a scene where the Grim Reapers in blue tights dragged the screaming Willie to a corner. In post-production, these people would go through special effects to create the desired image of the Grim Reaper. Although the scenes were simple, it was already past 11 a.m. by the time they finished filming. When Eric returned to the hotel, it was already past 12:30 a.m. Eric, I've asked the kitchen to prepare supper. Joanna Pakula, who had just come out of the shower and was sitting in the living room watching TV, stood up and said. Eric stepped forward and kissed the girl's face. Didn't I tell you that if we finish too late, you can rest first? The girl took the towel from Eric's hand and carefully wiped the man's wet hair. She said, It's okay. Didn't you ask me to be your personal assistant? Of course I have to do this job well. Eric put his arm around the girl's waist with a naughty smile. So obedient. Are you willing to do anything I ask of you? Joanna Pakula struggled slightly but couldn't get rid of the man's grip. Soon, she softened. However, she didn't answer Eric's question. Instead, she put the towel in her hand aside and complained, We've been busy all day. Let's get some news early after supper. Anyway, we'll have plenty of time in the future. Then you stay here tonight. I want to sleep with you in my arms, Eric said softly as he sniffed the girl's long hair. Okay. Oh, don't touch me. The supper will get cold soon. Hurry up and eat. After a while of intimacy, Eric walked to the dining table and had supper. From time to time, he chatted with the girl who was leaning on the sofa and looking over. After that day, Eric took the girl to New York. Joanna Pakula didn't resist. After these days of getting along, she also developed a faint sense of dependence on Eric. The special effects scenes of Ghost took 2 weeks to finish shooting. After a detailed review and confirmation, Eric handed the sample film to Stan Winston and others to take to Los Angeles for post-production. This was because the special effects used in Ghost were relatively simple, and there weren't many special effects shots. Many of the shots could even be completed using the most primitive film overlapping technique. Therefore, even if Eric had high requirements for some effects, the post-production wouldn't take more than a month. At most, it would be completed by the end of May. At that time, with Eric's filming speed, the whole movie wouldn't be far from completion. After the completion of the special effects part, it was May. Gradually, people began to visit the set. To Eric's surprise, the first to visit the set were the Trumps. Donald Trump brought his daughter, Ivanka Trump. It was noon. Because they had to shoot several outdoor scenes before and after Sam took Oldham to the bank to withdraw money, the crew blocked off a street that wasn't too busy in Manhattan. Eric, I'm really sorry. I couldn't help much with the matter some time ago. Donald Trump's first sentence was to apologize when he saw Eric. Eric smiled. Donald Trump really couldn't have helped much with that matter. It's okay, Donald. By the way, how are things on your side? Hearing this question, Donald Trump smiled. It's okay. I finally got through it. Thanks to your reminder, after spending some effort, the bank had no choice but to agree to continue the loan to me. Now that the resort has been completed and part of it is already in use, at least I won't go bankrupt again. After Donald Trump finished speaking, he conjured a card from his pocket and handed it to Eric. This is a membership card for my resort. Of course, this is the highest level. You can go to Atlantic City to take a look when you have time. Eric smiled and took the membership card. After thinking for a while, he remembered that Atlantic City should be in New Jersey. He had never been there. Some time ago, he happened to see on the entertainment news that Michael Jackson had attended the opening of Trump Resort. I'll go take a look when I have time. After Eric finished speaking, he looked at the little loli who was hugging a doll and walking around curiously. Innie, why didn't you say hello when you saw me? You look so unhappy. Did someone bully you? Chapter 329. Ivanka Trump wrinkled her nose and snorted. Then, she glared at her father with dissatisfaction. Donald Trump awkwardly whispered to Eric, Innie is angry with me. I promised to bring her over to watch your movie. That's why she's willing to talk to me. Eric raised his eyebrows slightly. Did something happen? I divorced Innie's mother some time ago. Donald Trump didn't hide it. So, Eric remembered that he had seen Donald Trump's wife at the premiere of Home Alone 2 a year ago. At that time, there didn't seem to be anything wrong with the two of them. However, this was someone else's family matter, so he couldn't ask too much. The divorce rate of Americans was more than 50%. Eric was almost used to this kind of thing. Among the people he knew now, most of them had divorced or their parents had divorced. After a few rounds, Ivanka suddenly leaned in front of Eric. Eric, Dad and Mom divorced. You're not a good person either. Eric was slightly taken aback. This logic is a bit strong. Your dad dumped your mom. What does it have to do with me? Eric helplessly spread his hands. Innie, I'm innocent. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with me, right? Did you forget what you promised me? Ivanka asked angrily. Eric thought for a moment and then shook his head. Why don't you give me a hint? Humph, bad guy. Ivanka hit Eric with the minor bunny doll in her hand. You promised me that you would let me act in your movie. Now, you're shooting a movie, but you didn't tell me. Oh, that. Eric suddenly realized. He had just mentioned it casually. He thought that with Ivanka's age, she might forget it quickly. He didn't expect the little loli to remember it even deeper than him. But, there's no role for a little girl in this movie. Humph, bad guy. You're lying. I won't talk to you anymore. Ivanka turned her face and said angrily. Ignoring him was a serious threat. Eric thought for a moment before saying, Innie, how about this? Later on, you will act as a little girl passing by the main lead. Yes, it would be best if you could hug your rabbit. Ivanka wanted to continue being angry, but she couldn't resist Eric's temptation. She quickly turned her face away. Really? Of course. Eric nodded solemnly. After all, it was just a passerby role. Of course, he couldn't say that out loud. I remember you saying that you joined an acting class. Let me see the results of your practice. You'll definitely be surprised, a guy who doesn't know anything other than directing, little loli said sarcastically. Eric was a little speechless. He hadn't forgotten this sentence. The lunch break passed quickly. Nicolas Cage and Whoopi Goldberg scenes were needless to say. Originally, the passers-by on the street were all adults, and there were no little girls. Now that little loli suddenly joined, Eric had to rearrange the scene. Innie, when that lady comes here, she can pull you along and start walking around. Keep walking along this road until you reach the other side. Remember, you have to act as if nothing happened. Don't look at the camera lens, and don't look curiously at the lady in the pink coat. I know. You're so long-winded. Ivanka waved her hand. Eric shrugged and walked back to the director's seat. Originally, He had suggested for Donald Trump to hold little Loli's hand and sit with her as passers-by. Donald Trump was of course very happy to be able to mend his relationship with his daughter. Unfortunately, little Loli wasn't willing. Eric could only choose a lady from the extras to hold little Loli's hand and act as a mother and daughter pair. "Everyone, get ready to shoot." Eric held the loudspeaker and shouted at everyone. The actors began to take their positions. Action! As soon as the voice fell, the camera showed Odimi, who had just donated the $4 million check to the Welfare Institute, walking forward with a depressed expression. "Odimi, I'm proud of you," Sam's ghost said as she followed behind Odimi. "I don't care if you're proud of me or not. What does a nun need so much money for?" Odimi, played by Ub Goldberg, complained angrily to the air, "Stop pestering me, and stop talking to me." Sam looked at Odimi, who was walking away, and added, "You're amazing." Hearing this, Odimi suddenly turned around. Of course, she couldn't see Sam, so she looked around, spat in the air, and turned away. Her figure looked so funny that Eric almost wanted to applaud. At the same time, on the monitor, on the other side of the road, the little girl holding the Mina Bunny plushie held the hand of a lady and walked across the street as if nothing had happened. Little Loli even glanced at Odimi, who seemed to be talking to the air, and then looked up as if she said something to her mother. However, the extra actress obviously didn't realize that the little girl would suddenly talk to her. Her expression froze and her footsteps paused for a moment. Cut. Eric shook his head regretfully. If the extra actress could cooperate, this scene would be perfect. After all, Odimi was talking to the air and spitting. It would be abnormal if the passers-by didn't have any reaction. And the little girl asking her mother what Odimi was doing out of curiosity looked very natural. "Wait a moment," Eric said to everyone, and then walked to Ivanka and the extra actress. "Madam, what's your name?" "Director Williams." "You can call me Elena." The extra actress was obviously a little nervous. She also realized that the problem just now was with her. Although she was a little angry that the little girl suddenly spoke out of the blue, she didn't dare to say it. After all, the little girl had a very special relationship with the director. "Well, Madam Elena, what did Innie say to you just now?" "She asked me, Auntie, why did that lady act like that?" Elena said honestly. Eric nodded. "That's right. If you had reacted appropriately just now, then the scene just now would have been perfect. In comparison, Ub Goldberg was talking to the air, so passers-by would definitely take a second look. So, Innie's reaction was right. Oh, don't worry, I'm not criticizing you. I just hope that you can cooperate with the next scene and react appropriately." "Then, how should I react?" Elena asked. Eric looked at Ub Goldberg, who came over and said with a smile, "If you see a woman acting crazy on the street with a child beside her, your first reaction will definitely be to speed up and leave." "Hey, Eric, which part of me looks like I'm crazy?" "You look like you do in every way," Eric said to Ub Goldberg with a smile. "Alright, that's it." After Eric said that, he reached out and pinched the little Loli's face. "Innie, you did well just now. Let's continue." "You're so annoying. Don't pinch my face." Ivanka, who was a little smug, suddenly waved her little hand angrily and swatted away Eric's devil's claws that reached out to her face. Eric smiled and shrugged, then instructed everyone to start again. It was still the same scene just now. Nicolas Cage and Ub Goldberg's performance was still impeccable. When Odme walked to the middle of the road and spat into the air, a pair of mother and daughter happened to pass by. The little girl, who was hugging the Mina Bunny plushie, glanced at Odme and curiously looked up to say something to the middle-aged woman. The woman quickly glanced at Ub Goldberg and did not explain. Instead, she nervously grabbed the little girl's little hand and walked away quickly. "Good, it's perfect," Eric said as he clapped. Although many people around did not know what exactly happened, they also clapped in support. When the next scene was arranged, the little Loli proudly came to Eric's side and reached out her little hand to him. "What?" Eric looked at the little hand in confusion and asked. Chapter 330. My reward, Eric, $20. Ivanka said confidently. Everyone was amused by Lorita's money-grubber look. Eric laughed too. He took out his wallet from his pocket and asked curiously, "Innie, what do you want the money for?" "I don't like my father anymore. I've decided not to spend his money anymore," Ivanka said crisply. Donald Trump, who was standing at the side, rubbed his forehead awkwardly. However, there was a smile on his face. Eric glanced at Donald Trump, held the wallet he had just taken out in his hand, and asked again, "But, your school fees, food, and accommodation are all your father's money, right?" "I've checked. This is my father's duty as a father. However, other than that, I don't want to spend his money anymore. Look, I bought the rabbit plushie with the money I earned from cleaning the house," Ivanka said seriously. She looked very cute when she was serious. However, her bright eyes stared at Eric's wallet as if she was afraid that Eric would go back on his word. Eric looked down in his wallet and took out a $100 bill. He handed it over and said, "Take it. The extra will be your reward for your outstanding performance. Don't treat me like a child. My father did that before. I don't want it. $20 it is." The crowd of onlookers finally burst into laughter. All right. Eric shook his head with a smile. He opened his wallet, only to find a stack of $100 bills. "Look, Innie, I don't have any change. What do you think I should do?" Although the people around them definitely had $20 bills, Eric still showed his wallet to Ivanka. He wanted to tease the little girl. Ivanka carefully looked at Eric's wallet and was stunned. As Donald Trump's daughter, the little girl used to live a carefree life. Whatever she wanted, someone would buy it for her. Therefore, she rarely came into contact with money. Due to her parents' sudden divorce some time ago, Ivanka had the idea of earning money on her own. Now that she was faced with such a complicated problem that she had never experienced before, she was suddenly at a loss of how to deal with it. Therefore, the little girl subconsciously looked at her father. "Innie, if you want my help, you'll have to pay a consultation fee." $20, Donald Trump said in a businesslike tone with a straight face. Ivanka stared at her father angrily and looked at Eric again. $20. Ivanka repeated. She then looked at Eric without blinking. It was obvious that the little girl was not going to be reasonable. Eric saw the assistant director gesturing to him that the next scene was ready. Therefore, he did not have time to joke with Ivanka. He stuffed the $100 bill into Ivanka's hand and said, "Here, take the $100. The remaining $80 will be the advance payment. You can make 4 cameo appearances in my movies in the future." Ivanka was about to return the money to Eric in dissatisfaction when she heard what he said. She tilted her head and thought that it was a good idea. The most important thing was that Eric did not charge her a consulting fee like her despicable father did. Therefore, she nodded quickly and said, "No problem. But you can only make 4 cameo appearances." "Of course." Eric nodded. Looking at Ivanka's little face, he somehow thought of an old man who always appeared and disappeared mysteriously in superhero movies. It would be very interesting if there was always a little girl who appeared and disappeared mysteriously with a doll in her arms, wouldn't it? After the filming started again, Donald Trump tactfully left with his daughter. In the next few days, the filming of the exterior scenes was almost done. Eric began the most important indoor scenes. Sam and Molly's house was set in an apartment in Soho, Manhattan. Soho was originally an old industrial area in New York. Later, due to the decline of New York's manufacturing industry, there was a period of time when a large number of factory apartments were empty. Because of the cheap rent, many artistic creators who came to New York to pursue their dreams gathered here and rented cheap factory buildings as their own studios. Over the decades, Soho gradually became synonymous with contemporary art. The concept of Soho also spread throughout the world with the development of the times. Molly in Ghost was an artist. Therefore, the two of them living here was very suitable for their roles in the movie. Because of the report about the plane crash on TV, Sam's pessimistic words caused Molly to lose sleep. Therefore, the girl got up alone to make ceramics. Sam, who woke up in a daze, found that his lover had left and went to Molly's studio. Immediately, it created the most classic scene in Ghost. I want to be able to shoot this scene with a stage effect. The most important thing is the lighting. This scene is roughly divided into 2 parts. The first part is the scene where the embryo is pulled. Look, although there is a light here, I don't need it to be used in the shot. I just need a lighting effect. As for the second part, I need a high contrast lighting effect, Eric said as he walked around the room with the lighting technician. The lighting technician nodded repeatedly to show that he understood. After a series of instructions, Eric walked to Nicolas Cage and Bridget Fonda, who were preparing. Initially, Cage and Bridget Fonda were chatting casually. It was obvious that the relationship between the two was somewhat intimate. In fact, this was the effect that Eric needed. As a touching romance film, if the male and female protagonists did not have chemistry, unless the 2 actors' acting skills reached a certain level, it would be a disaster for the movie. Because of this, although Bridget Fonda was very beautiful, Eric did not make a move like he did in the past. He needed the female lead to maintain chemistry with the male lead. When it came to movies and women, Eric had always been clear about the relationship between the primary and the secondary. In Eric's heart, movies had always been the most important. This was the foundation for him to establish himself in Hollywood. As long as he could achieve enough success in movies, chasing women would be a piece of cake. Seeing Eric coming over, the 2 who were chatting involuntarily wanted to get up. "It's okay. Have a seat." Eric waved his hand and pulled a chair to sit opposite the 2. He casually asked, "What were you talking about just now?" The 2 looked at each other. Then Bridget said, "Cage said that a famous English troupe will be performing Hamlet on Broadway tomorrow night. He asked if I wanted to go see it." Chapter 331. Hamlet. Not bad. As long as it doesn't affect the shooting, you can arrange your time in private. Eric nodded non-committally and did not express any opinions. He then asked, "How's the preparation for the next scene coming along?" Hearing Eric's words, Bridget Fonda was clearly a little disappointed. Although Cage was very outstanding now, he was still a far cry from Eric. When she got the role, Bridget Fonda felt that with Eric's rumored personality, something would definitely happen during the filming process. After all, she was very confident in her appearance. Unfortunately, things did not go as she wished. Now that filming had been going on for more than half a month, Eric had never shown any interest in her. Bridget Fonda's nature as a woman's resentment inevitably made her feel a little indignant. Seeing that Bridget Fonda was no longer speaking, Cage quickly said, "It's all ready. Bridget and I have rehearsed several times in our free time. There definitely won't be any problems." "Rehearsal?" Eric asked subconsciously. After all, after the stretching scene, there would be an intimate scene that would last more than 2 minutes. Cage also realized that his answer was a little ambiguous, so he explained awkwardly, "It's just a simple rehearsal. Nothing else." Eric was not interested in such details, so he nodded and said, "Okay, you guys continue to prepare. I'll go take a look at the set." As soon as Eric left, Bridget Fonda punched Cage in a shrewish manner. "Who rehearsed with you? We clearly just had a casual chat." Cage was a little embarrassed. "Do you want me to tell the director the truth that we didn't do much preparation? You shouldn't have said that. You clearly know what's going to happen next." "Okay, that's a mistake." Cage shrugged. "But, Bridget, you don't have a chance. Everyone can tell that Eric and his personal assistant, Joanna Pakula, are very close. Let me tell you, a few days ago when I woke up for a run, I saw that woman coming out of Eric's room." Bridget Fonda never expected her thoughts to be seen through by Cage as she reflexively retorted, "What has that got to do with me?" "Well, forget what I said," Cage said, then picked up the script and began to read. Bridget Fonda also raised the script in her hand to block her face, but it was inevitable that she was a little distracted. The camera paused on the quiet corridor for a moment before moving slowly. Finally, it stopped on Emily, who was concentrating on making a vase. The vertical orange light shone on the girl who was wearing a simple sleeveless shirt, giving her an indescribable sense of beauty. In her free time over the past few days, Bridget Fongda had been learning the art of pulling embryos from the ceramic master hired by the production crew. On the shelf near the girl were the works she had personally completed over the past few days. At this moment, in the camera, Bridget Fonda was doing quite well. A vase embryo was gradually taking form in the woman's hands. The silence lasted for a moment before Sam, bare-chested, walked out from behind Jasmine. His arms were folded in front of him, and he had a drowsy look on his face. "What are you doing?" "I can't sleep," Emily said, turning her head to look at him. Sam moved a stool to sit behind his lover and said apologetically, "I must have fallen asleep." "What time is it again?" 2 in the morning, Emily said as she stuck her head out and pecked Sam lightly on the lips. After carefully observing Emily's movements for a while, Sam gently poked the woman's waist when she bent over, and the vase embryo in Emily's hands suddenly became deformed. Emily did not mind at all and twisted her waist. Her boyfriend had no choice but to let go of her. He reached out and touched the embryo gently, instantly destroying it. "Oh no, I hope this isn't your masterpiece," Sam said with an insincere smile. Emily pursed her lips helplessly and said, "Not anymore." Emily removed the clay from the extractor and planned to start again. Sam asked tentatively, "Can I help?" "Of course, place your hand here and let the clay flow through your fingers," Emily instructed Sam. However, Sam was not too obedient and kept teasing the woman. Gradually, Emily also began to feel aroused, and the two of them naturally kissed. "Cut," Eric called out at the right time. The two actors stopped and walked to his side under Eric's instructions. Eric instructed the stage supervisor, who quickly got to work and placed an identical embryo on the extractor. Although this was already the 6th take, Eric still replayed the scene calmly and explained the strengths and weaknesses of the two actors. He did not show any signs of impatience, because Eric knew that once he showed that he could not see it, the two actors would definitely be affected by his emotions and become anxious. Therefore, he spoke with a faint tone of encouragement. "Nick, your performance just now was almost perfect, but there's one thing you need to pay attention to. Look at this scene, your smile is a little too forced. It'd be better if you were more relaxed. And Bridget, you only need to remember one emotion, and that is indulgence. Although your lover is making trouble for you, you can't show any displeasure from the beginning to the end. Instead, you have to indulge your boyfriend like a mother indulging her naughty child." "Like mother?" Bridget Fonda asked in puzzlement. Eric nodded and said, "Yes, think of when you were young and your mother was cooking dinner in the kitchen, and you ran in to help. Back then, although your mother would pretend to be angry and glare at you, she would definitely have a loving smile on her face. I need you to express this indulgence emotion." Hearing Eric's words, Bridget Fonda's eyes became a little blank. Eric wanted to face-palm helplessly. It seemed that she was another poor girl from an unlucky family. In short, indulgence. Take a 5-minute break and let the makeup artist touch up your makeup. Take a good look at what I just said. Don't be in a hurry. It'll be fine as long as we can finish this scene today, Eric said again. Bridget Fonda and Cage nodded and walked to the rest area together. Eric walked to the automatic record player and inserted the Unrestrained Melody record into it. He pressed the play button, and a familiar melody immediately came from the set. With the help of the makeup artist, Fonda and Cage, who were touching up their makeup, looked over and understood that Eric had specially played it for them. They listened quietly. Chapter 332. In the shot, the girl hung on Sam like a koala bear, kissing the man infatuatedly. The two of them slowly fell onto the sofa next to them. Good, this one is done. After more than 4 hours, Eric, who was sitting behind the monitor and staring at the screen, finally shouted. Everyone present, including the two protagonists who had just gotten up from the sofa, breathed a sigh of relief. It was less than 4 minutes, and there was only 1 page in the script. After 4 hours of shooting, anyone would inevitably feel anxious. However, Eric, who should have been the one to explode the most, didn't say anything. Of course, the people present didn't dare to show their impatience. They just repeated the scene over and over again. Eric looked at his watch and said, "Let's call it a day. It's already very late. There's no need to tidy up here for the time being. Go back and rest as soon as possible." Before everyone had time to cheer for the director's thoughtfulness, Eric added, "Don't be late tomorrow." There was a sudden cry around, but no one dared to complain. After all, they were all paid enough overtime, and Eric definitely had work to do next. He was much more tired than they were. The crowd quickly dispersed. By the time Eric and the assistant director checked the filmed material together and put it away in the safe, more than half an hour had passed. The shooting in Manhattan, New York, had been going on for nearly a month. Because Eric had a ready-made film in his mind as a reference, his shooting progress had always been much faster than other Hollywood directors. In just a month, the shooting of Ghost had been completed by 2/3. It might only take another 10 days of shooting before it could be wrapped up. There was also news from Los Angeles from time to time. The production of the film's special effects was going smoothly. Eric even watched part of the effects through a video call. The filming of Basic Instinct in San Francisco did not go so smoothly. It was not because of the male and female protagonists. The performances of the two protagonists were very good. It was because of something else. As everyone knew, San Francisco was a city where homosexuals gathered in North America. Because of a controversial scene in Basic Instinct that was reported by the paparazzi with exaggerated details, it caused protests from San Francisco homosexual organizations. Some people even obstructed the filming of the movie. Jeffrey had to personally contact the San Francisco Police Department for help. These days, Basic Instinct had been filming under the protection of more than 50 police officers all day long. For this reason, the crew had to pay a large sponsorship fee to the San Francisco Police Department. On the other hand, Firefly's first movie, The Silence of the Lambs, had already finished filming for more than a week. It was said that in order to complete the movie as soon as possible, the crew had to split into 3 parts. By the end of May, the film would have completed its post-production work. However, due to the rush of production, the original 20 million yuan cost had increased to 25 million yuan. Eric had not seen the sample yet, but he believed that with the original director, Jonathan Demme, directing the movie, and even the 2 main actors, there would not be any changes. This movie should not be too different from his previous life. According to the plan, the movie would start screening at the beginning of June. The official release date was scheduled for June 8th. However, Robert Shea only arranged for 1,500 premiere theaters for the movie. Although Eric knew that Robert Shea was squeezing resources for his own movie, Sleeping with the Enemy, Eric did not say much. It was good enough that the movie could be released during the summer. After all, The Silence of the Lambs was an R-rated bloody horror movie. According to Hollywood's usual practice, this kind of movie would either be released during the Easter season or at the end of the summer. It was very lucky that it could be released during the popular summer. As for 1,500 theaters, it was not a small number for a horror movie. In addition to the movie, Eric gradually realized that he had more things to do. Not only did he have to worry about Firefly's operations, but he also had to deal with Pixar, Digital Domain, and even Cisco from time to time. Although he had been focusing on Firefly, Eric did not stop paying attention to these companies. Due to sufficient financial support, the production of Toy Story was already more than halfway done. It might not make it in time for the Christmas season, but it would definitely make it in time for next year's summer. This version of Toy Story was much more refined than the one in his previous life. There were many more details, and the total length was not 81 minutes like in his previous life. Instead, it had been increased to a more standard 90 minutes. Eric believed that the appearance of Toy Story would definitely surprise the Hollywood film industry. As for Digital Domain, Eric was very assured to hand it over to Stan Winston. He only arranged for a financial director to supervise the company's finances in the digital domain. He did not intervene much in other aspects. After going public in February, Cisco's stock price skyrocketed. Although it slowed down after more than a month, after Cisco's first quarter profit report was released, the stock price rose again. Eric had invested $70 million, and it was now worth more than $200 million, and it showed no signs of stopping. Many investors had already begun to regret transferring their original shares to Firefly Investments. While paying attention to these things, Eric gradually realized that the people around him had become a little strange. Occasionally, they would look at him strangely, as if they were planning something. This feeling was very subtle, and he could not tell whether it was his illusion or not. For example, today, the crew members all found excuses to ask for leave, hoping that Eric could end today's shoot an hour earlier. At the same time, they also said that they had things to do. If it was only one or two of them, it would be fine, but everyone was like this. If Eric still did not realize something, there would really be a problem with his IQ. Because everyone's attitude was firm and unanimous, Eric had to compromise. Anyway, after working so hard for so many days, the film was almost finished. He planned to comply with the public's wishes. However, when it was time to wrap up, Eric still caught the cameraman, Nickel, who was about to leave. "Nickel, tell me what happened?" Nickel looked at Eric strangely, as if to remind him, but also felt that it was a little unbelievable. Faced with Eric's interrogation, Nickel looked around and saw that many people were looking in his direction. He quickly shook his head and said, "Eric, I can't tell you. I'll be killed." "If you don't tell me, I'll kill you right now," Eric threatened. The cameraman straightened his neck and looked like he was ready to die. Anyway, he knew that Eric could not do anything to him. Eric punched Nickel and said, "Okay, get out of here. I hope you don't cause any trouble for me." "Of course not, of course." Nickel smiled and nodded. After walking a few steps away and making sure that Eric could not hear him, Nickel could not help but sigh. "Unbelievable, really unbelievable. You can forget this kind of thing. No wonder you're a workaholic." Chapter 333. With a head full of doubts, Eric cleaned up the set and returned to the hotel where he was staying. He found that the first floor where the crew was staying was deserted. The lively scene after the crew had finished work had completely disappeared. As soon as he opened the door and walked into his room, a pink figure floated on top of him. She wrapped herself around Eric like a koala and kissed him. Okay, Drew, why are you in New York?" Eric pulled Drew off of him and looked at her. She was wearing a pink knee-length skirt. Her hair was in a bun, and it seemed that she had cut her hair. The fringe on her forehead set off her unique aura. "I'm here to visit," Drew said with a smile. She pulled Eric to sit next to her and sat on Eric's lap. Eric looked at the lass's rolling eyes and quickly realized that today's matter had something to do with the lass. Eric said, "Okay, tell me honestly, what are you guys planning?" Hee, I won't tell you," Drew said shamelessly as she propped herself up in front of Eric. Eric immediately scratched the girl's armpit. The little girl chattered for a while before Eric let her go. "Are you going to tell me or not?" Eric made a gesture to continue scratching her. Okay, you'll know later," Drew said and stood up. She sat down and took a few deep breaths. Then, she took out an eye mask from the coffee table. "Here, put it on first. I'll take you somewhere." Eric took it and played with it. He looked up and smiled. "What if I don't want to?" "Then I'll cry for you to see," the little girl immediately threatened. "This isn't a common scene." "Come on, cry," Eric said with interest. Drew wrinkled her face and sniffed a few times. She didn't squeeze out a single tear. Then, she screamed and jumped into Eric's arms. She scratched Eric's body like a wild cat. Put it on. "Okay, stop scratching, I'll put it on," Eric said helplessly. He was curious to see what the girl was going to do today. Drew put on the eye mask and pulled Eric out. Eric only felt like he entered an elevator and was pulled into a car. Then, he heard the sound of the car starting. "Hey, I'll say this first. Don't go overboard. Otherwise, I'll be angry." "Am I that kind of person?" the girl retorted. "Aren't you?" "Humph." The car wasn't fast, and Eric wasn't in a hurry. He leaned against the back of the seat with the eye mask on. He closed his eyes and rested for a while. After a while, Eric felt that the car was still driving. It didn't seem like it was going to stop any time soon, and Eric was already a little sleepy. How much longer? Eric couldn't help but ask. Don't worry. The girl looked at the pager in her hand. In fact, the car had been driving around the streets of Manhattan to buy time, but Eric didn't know. Eric didn't say anything and leaned against the back of the seat again. The pager in his hand finally beeped. Drew gestured to the driver, and the car sped up. It only took them 10 minutes to arrive at their destination. The girl pulled Eric all the way out of the underground parking lot and into the elevator. A few minutes later, the girl pushed open a door and whispered in Eric's ear, "Surprise!" Then she quickly pulled off Eric's eye mask. The sound of firecrackers and flying ribbons filled the hall. The people in the hall had obviously rehearsed this, and they all said in unison, "Happy birthday!" "Wow!" Eric exclaimed, not knowing what to do. Hearing this, he finally remembered that today was the 16th of May, the birthday of the original owner of this body. In his previous life, Eric didn't care much about birthdays, let alone now. In addition, he had been so busy these days that his feet didn't touch the ground, so Eric couldn't even remember this. Familiar faces crowded around him. In addition to the crew members, the actors and directors that he had worked with over the past year were all here. The executives of Firefly and Pixar were also here. Eric also saw Stan Winston, who was supposed to be in Los Angeles, and James Cameron, who was supposed to be preparing for Terminator 2. Obviously, in order to prepare for this birthday party, Drew must have put in a lot of effort. It wasn't easy to just hide it from him. After joking around for a while, the crowd slowly dispersed. "Hey, Jonah, how's the post-production of The Silence of the Lambs going?" "Not bad, my movie?" "Of course, it's almost done." "Wow, I didn't expect you to come." "Tom, what films have you taken on recently?" Of course, what I said still counts." "Hello, Julia." "Hey, Liz, it's my birthday today. You can't be like this, like an old hen." "Robert, how's the filming of Sleeping with the Enemy going?" "Well, when I'm done with Ghost, I'll go take a look." "You should believe in Julia. She has enough box office appeal now." After walking around and greeting the guests one by one, Eric was finally able to take a short break. He found a sofa in the corner and sat down. The little girl who had been sticking to him righteously all this time carefully poured a glass of juice for Eric. At this time, James Cameron, who had greeted him not long ago, walked over with his wife, Catherine Bigelow. "Hi, Jim, and Ms. Bigelow." Eric straightened up. James Cameron and Catherine Bigelow sat down next to Eric. Looking at the couple, Eric couldn't help but recall some memories from his previous life. Cameron aside, Catherine Bigelow was also a legendary woman in Hollywood. The themes of this female director's movies were completely different from those of other women in Hollywood. It could even be said that Catherine Bigelow's movies had little to do with women. Just listen to the names of the movies she directed: Assassination of Osama bin Laden, The Hurt Locker, K-19, End of the Century Frenzy. Most importantly, in the parallel universe, Catherine Bigelow was the first female winner of the Best Director award in the history of the Oscars. Moreover, Catherine Bigelow's biggest rival for that year's Oscars was James Cameron, who was sitting next to her at this moment. The level of excitement was enough to make a movie, such as The Attack of the Ex-Wife or something. In his memory, James Cameron had a spark with the female lead of Terminator 2, Linda Hamilton, when he was filming Terminator 2. After Terminator 2 was released, Cameron quickly divorced Catherine Bigelow. "Eric, actually, I want to discuss something with you," James Cameron said after greeting Eric. Eric made a puzzled expression. He thought to himself, "Don't tell me you want the best investment so soon? The movie hasn't even started shooting yet." Seeing Eric's expression, James Cameron looked at his wife. Catherine Bigelow took the initiative to say, "It's like this, Mr. Williams." "Just call me Eric," Eric interrupted her. Catherine Bigelow did not show any displeasure. She nodded and said, "Some time ago, I got a good script. It's a story about surfers, but because of a conflict in the casting, Columbia Pictures, who originally owned the copyright, gave up the project. So, I'm now looking for investors. When Eric heard the word surfer, he vaguely thought of a movie, but he had not seen it. He had only seen some introductions in his previous life. He only remembered the male lead of the movie. Can you introduce the plot? Eric asked. It's roughly like this. The new young FBI agent, Johnny, is investigating a bank robbery. After some investigation, he finds that many clues point to a group of surfers. So, Johnny goes to the beach in Southern California and explains the young surfing coach, Tyler. It took Kathryn Bigelow 5 minutes to briefly recount the entire story, and she also shared some of her own opinions on the shoot. So, you want to tell this story in a darker way, right? Eric asked. Kathryn Bigelow nodded. I think this way, we can interrogate human nature more and have more practical significance. By the way, you just said that you and Columbia had a conflict in the casting. Who is the male lead you chose? Eric asked cautiously, although he already had the answer in his heart. Keanu Reeves, Kathryn Bigelow said. This big boy played Ted in Bill and Ted's Adventures last year. Columbia said that Keanu Reeves' image is very different from that of an FBI agent. However, I think that Keanu Reeves can definitely become an excellent action actor. He has this potential. Sure enough, Eric said in his heart. After recalling the brief introduction of the movie in his memory, Eric was 80% sure. At this time, when he heard Kathryn Bigelow say Keanu Reeves' name, Eric no longer had any doubts. Although he did not know how the movie turned out, Eric did remember one thing very clearly. In the end, the movie was successful in the box office. As long as he could confirm this, Eric had already made a decision. Ms. Bigelow, I need a detailed script and project budget, Eric said. Cameron and Kathryn Bigelow both looked surprised. Since Eric said so, it must mean that the other party agreed. The couple did not have much hope. After all, neither of them thought that this was a commercial film. Otherwise, Columbia would not have given up on this project. Eric, I didn't bring this information today, but I can give it to you in 3 days. Eric nodded and said, By the way, who will be the producer of your movie? Kathryn Bigelow looked at her husband. Originally, Jim had already agreed, but now it seems that we have to change the producer. Originally, we couldn't confirm when we would be able to get the investment. I thought that it wouldn't be too late for Jim to finish filming Terminator 2. Then I'll be the producer myself, Eric said after thinking about it. You'll do it. Kathryn Bigelow immediately revealed a look of suspicion. Hey Kate, don't you believe that Eric has the ability? Cameron pretended to be dissatisfied and glared at his wife. Kathryn Bigelow finally reacted. Although Eric was only 20 years old today, the achievements of the young man in front of her made more than 90% of the directors in Hollywood feel inferior. In addition, he was now running a film company second only to the Big Seven in Hollywood. It was definitely more than enough for him to be the producer of a movie. Okay. Kathryn Bigelow nodded and said, I was just thinking, Eric, don't you need to shoot your own movie? Of course I do, but it doesn't seem to conflict. It just so happens that I haven't done any specific production work before. I believe this is also a form of training. Seeing Kathryn Bigelow's expression just now, Eric quickly waved his hand. Don't worry, Ms. Bigelow. You should believe in my ability. I think that as long as they know me well enough, no one in Hollywood will doubt my ability, right? Seems like it. Kathryn Bigelow finally nodded. Seeing that the matter was resolved so easily, Cameron's expression changed. He wanted to continue working hard, such as increasing the budget for Terminator 2 or something. However, Eric obviously saw Cameron's intention to take advantage of the situation. It was obviously not a good idea to let Cameron succeed so easily. Eric stood up directly. That's it, Jim. We'll talk about the specifics later. Today is my birthday. Have fun. After saying that, Eric let the little girl take his arm and walk to other places. Hey, Jim, that little guy must have seen through what you wanted to say. After Eric left, Kathryn Bigelow teased him with a hint of mockery. Cameron shrugged indifferently. Anyway, he won't be able to escape sooner or later. Although Catherine Bigelow wanted to persuade her husband to restrain himself, she gave up when she thought of Cameron's harsh and nitpicky character when making movies. She knew that her husband would definitely not listen to her. "Jim, tell me the truth. How much are you planning to spend on Terminator 2? Cameron calculated for a moment, then looked around and sneakily raised a finger at his wife. Catherine Bigelow sucked in a cold breath. $100 million? Cameron nodded. You must be crazy. That little guy will be pissed to death by you, Catherine Bigelow said helplessly. After all, in the entire Hollywood, there was no film with an investment of $100 million. An investment of more than $50 million was enough for the film company to hype up. He has money. Isn't money used to make movies? Cameron retorted righteously. Chapter 334. As the waiter pushed a multi-layered cake into the party hall, the birthday song started playing and the party reached its climax. Several women who were known to be close to Eric were pushed out of the crowd by the guests. They blushed and surrounded Eric as they helped to blow out the candles on the cake. The lively party didn't end until the early hours of the morning. The crowd gradually dispersed. As the host, Eric politely sent them off one by one. During the process, he inevitably encountered a few pairs of resentful eyes. But in this situation, of course, he couldn't bring any women back to his residence. Not only did he have to take care of the other women's feelings, but there were also a lot of paparazzi gathered outside the Hilton Hotel where the birthday party was held. Eric's every move tonight would definitely be the focus of the paparazzi's attention. For example, now, when they were rushing back to the hotel in the same car that they came in, there were several paparazzi following behind them. There were even a few paparazzi riding motorcycles that were close to Eric's car. Although he tried to restrain himself, he had to socialize with so many people. It was inevitable that Eric was a little drunk. At this time, he was leaning against the back of the car. Drew, who was sitting next to him, was leaning on Eric like a kitten. Because there were many people at the party, the girl was very obedient and didn't drink. When they returned to the hotel where the crew was staying, Eric went directly to the floor of the underground parking lot. The girl followed Eric without hesitation, as if everything was natural. Although a lot of crew members who came back at the same time noticed this detail, they turned a blind eye. After all, the girl's curvy figure made it easy for people to forget her age. Eric looked at the girl and shrugged helplessly. Drew, did you get a room at the hotel? Drew raised her hand and pointed at Eric's door. My luggage is inside. Ah, okay. Eric knew that it was useless to say anything more, so he took out the room card from his pocket. As soon as he opened the door, he saw a small mountain of beautifully packaged gift boxes in the suite's living room. Wow, when was this delivered? Eric asked in surprise. I ordered someone to send it over during the party. In fact, gifts have been coming over in the mail for the past few days. Alan and I spent a lot of effort to hide this matter, Drew said with a smile, looking as if he was asking for credit. All right, thank you for preparing this surprise for me. I like it very much. Eric held the girl's little chin and kissed her on the cheek. Feeling that her little hands were about to hug him again, Eric quickly let go. Let's open the gifts. I've never received so many gifts before. Let me help. Drew was obviously interested as well. He walked over and picked up a gift box to take a look. He curled his lips and said, Oh, you can do this yourself. Eric took it and looked at the name on it. So it was from Nicole. No wonder the girl had such an expression. Eric opened the palm-sized box and saw the gift's content. It was a blue and white striped Versace silk tie. The girl, who had been paying attention to Eric's movements, suddenly widened her eyes when she saw the gift's content. Then, she said with dissatisfaction, she really doesn't hide it. Why didn't she just give him a red tie? Eric smiled and ignored the smell of the girl's snacks. Generally, only between a man and a woman who were intimate would a woman give a man a tie in the hope of tying the man down. If a woman gave a red tie, it meant that she wanted to marry the man. That was why the girl said that just now. All right, let's open the others." After the girl said that, she sat cross-legged on the carpet next to the pile of gifts. She picked up a relatively large box that was definitely not a tie and opened it. Eric put the tie that Nicole gave him aside and walked to the pile of gifts. He sat down next to Drew and picked up a box to open. After a while, Eric opened the gift box from Virginia. Then, another tie appeared in front of the two of them. Humph, how tasteless. She actually chose this pattern. The girl didn't have as big of a reaction this time, but she still muttered with dissatisfaction. Eric picked up the light blue polka dot tie from Virginia with great interest and gestured in front of him. Then, he put it back into the box. After thinking about it, Eric began to look through the pile of gifts. More than 10 minutes later, a few more ties appeared in front of the two of them. "Don't move, let me count." Drew gloomily stopped Eric from putting away the gifts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wah, I don't want to live anymore. The girl was like a young woman who had caught her unfaithful husband on the spot. She jumped up and threw herself on the sofa next to her, covering her head with a pillow as she cried out. Eric ignored the girl. Instead, he held an unsigned gift box in a daze. Of the 6 ties, 5 of them had names: Virginia, Nicole, Jennifer Connelly, Famek Jensen, and Joanna Pakula. Julia and Elizabeth, who he had a relationship with, didn't give him a tie. Then, who was the other person? He put the gift box under his nose and sniffed it. The faint smell of fresh perfume was familiar. A pretty and stubborn face appeared in Eric's mind. Speaking of which, the 2nd season of Friends was about to start filming. He hadn't seen Jennifer Aniston in a long time. Acquaintances in the past were always unforgettable. Although the two of them had broken up, he occasionally saw news about Jennifer Aniston on TV and newspapers. When the paparazzi asked about Jennifer Aniston, she was no longer as excited as when the news first broke out. Seeing that Eric didn't come over to coax her, the girl quickly poked her head out from under the pillow. Seeing that Eric was deep in thought, she stuck out her tongue and obediently climbed down from the sofa to get close to Eric. Eric, Eric, Eric. Drew waved his hand in front of Eric and called his name several times. Eric pushed the girl's hand away and asked, "By the way, where's your gift?" "Huh?" The girl opened her mouth and hesitated for a moment. She got up and ran to the corner of the living room. She opened her suitcase and took out a small box. She walked back to Eric and said, "Here." Eric looked at the palm-sized box in his hand and suddenly had a premonition. He quickly opened the box and took out a red tie. He waved it in front of the girl and said, "This is too obvious. What did someone say just now?" Chapter 335. Because of the party last night, Eric made a last-minute adjustment to the weekly rest day to today. Everyone in the crew had a wild night last night and had been busy for so many days. Therefore, although it was late now, not many people were up. Finally, it was the day off, so of course, they had to sleep in. However, there were people who got up early. Since she became Eric's personal assistant, Joanna's work and rest schedule was very regular. Most of the time, she even got up earlier than Eric. Although she went to bed late last night like the others, she still got up early today. She went to the restaurant to pack some food and went back to the floor where the crew was. Walking through the quiet corridor, Joanna Pakula came to Eric's door with breakfast in one hand and a stack of today's newspapers in the other hand. She hesitated whether she should go in or not. Looking at her watch, it was already 8:30. Although they had not known each other for a long time, Joanna Pakula knew Eric's work and rest habits very well. Under normal circumstances, Eric should be up at this time. However, that was only under normal circumstances. Last night, that little girl, Drew, had followed Eric back to the room. Who knew how long the two of them would go crazy? Joanna Pakula's face turned slightly red at the thought of certain scenes, although she also gave Eric a tie as a gift yesterday. However, Joanna Pakula was not as ambitious as other women. After so many years, the girl had recognized a lot of reality, or rather, she had given up on many things. Now she only hoped to live a more stable life. Although Eric had not fulfilled his promise, her life now was much better than before. She always felt that she was a very useless person. Other people could find a job in Hollywood while pursuing their dream of being a star, but she knew nothing except acting. In the eyes of outsiders, the acting industry always seemed to mean money and fame, but the reality was far from as good as people imagined. Take Hollywood for example. There were more than 100,000 people who had registered for the Actors Guild, and there were countless actors who were not even qualified to join the guild. However, in this huge group, only a few A-list and B-list stars could live a glamorous and decent life. As long as these people could film a film every year, the salary they received would allow them to live a very comfortable life. But other than that, actors below C-list were much more downtrodden. Let's not talk about actors who were not popular. Just C-list actors were usually only able to play supporting roles in movies. Even in those big-budget movies, many of the supporting actors' salaries were not even 1% of the main characters. The main character was paid millions of USD, while the supporting actors were only paid tens of thousands of USD. In those low-budget movies, even the lead actor's salary was usually only tens of thousands of dollars. The supporting actor's salary was often less than that of many ordinary wage earners. Even so, there were often thousands of people fighting for such an opportunity. Originally, Joanna Pakula was in this class of actors, and she was even unemployed all year round. However, because she studied drama in college and had no other skills, it was not easy for her to change her profession. Therefore, in the case of not receiving a script, Joanna often had to do some odd jobs to get by. "Good morning, Miss Pakula." A door in the corridor suddenly opened, and a lighting technician of the crew walked out of the room. Seeing Joanna Pakula standing at the door of Eric's room, he did not think much and casually greeted her. "Ah, Mr. Lawrence, good morning." Joanna Pakula was shocked and hurriedly greeted him. Afraid that the other party would see her embarrassment, the girl did not hesitate any longer. She took out the room card of Eric's room from her pocket and directly opened the door and walked in. After closing the door, Joanna Pakula breathed a sigh of relief. The room was quiet, and all kinds of packaging boxes were scattered in the living room. Looking at the closed bedroom door, Joanna Pakula thought that Eric had not woken up yet. She quietly put the things in her hands on the coffee table and bent down to clean up the mess. Just as she folded a few pieces of packaging paper together, the girl heard the sound of the door opening from the balcony. Looking up, she saw Eric, who was shirtless and wearing a pair of sports shorts, wiping the sweat on his forehead with a towel. "Joan, good morning." Eric greeted the girl. "Morning, Eric." Joanna Pakula quickly got up and replied. The girl knew that there was a treadmill on the balcony, which was specially arranged by the hotel on the day Eric checked in. Looking at the situation, Eric obviously had just exercised, but, glancing at the bedroom door, the girl was a little surprised. Based on her understanding of Eric, this man slept with Drew last night, so it was impossible for him to not do anything. She did not expect Eric to wake up early in the morning to exercise. Seeing Joanna Pakula looking at the bedroom door, Eric quickly guessed the girl's thoughts. Smiling, he asked, "What are you thinking about?" "No, nothing." Joanna Pakula shook her head and said, "By the way, I've already prepared breakfast and today's newspaper." Eric did not walk to the coffee table where the breakfast was placed. Instead, he walked straight to Joanna and said in a joking tone, "What did you buy today?" "Same as before. It's all your favorite food," Joanna said as she opened the bag containing the breakfast. In the bedroom, Drew, who was sleeping restlessly, turned over and kicked the quilt away. Feeling the coldness on her body, the girl waved her little hands unwillingly, as if she was trying to grab something, but to no avail. So, she could only open her eyes lazily and look beside her. Eric was no longer beside her. After muttering a few words, the girl grabbed Eric's pillow and hugged it in her arms. Like a puppy, she sniffed it twice and snorted a few times, planning to go back to sleep. However, she vaguely seemed to hear something, and this voice did not belong to Eric. The vigilant girl quickly opened her eyes wide and listened carefully. Due to the hotel's excellent soundproofing, although the sound was very faint, she could be sure that it was definitely not an illusion. She randomly found a t-shirt of Eric's and put it on. Like a cat, the girl leaned against the door and stopped for a while. Suddenly, the voice became clearer. After climbing to the door and eavesdropping for a while, Drew identified the woman's identity. Sigh, really? After sulking for a while, the girl sighed in a very weary manner. Chapter 336. No matter who it was, turning 20 was an important birthday. Eric's 20th birthday would definitely attract more attention from the media. In addition, many famous people in Hollywood would appear at the birthday party. Therefore, after the party, the media would inevitably hype it up. The focus of the entertainment tabloids was on the actresses who attended the party. After the big reversal of the storm at the beginning of the year, the actresses who were originally attacked, no matter what happened in private, had clarified the facts on the surface. In addition, Eric and Jennifer Aniston had broken up. Therefore, the candidate of Eric's next girlfriend had become the focus of the tabloids. When he was in Los Angeles, Eric had been very careful to protect his personal secrets. The paparazzi had not been able to dig up much information. However, the situation this time was very different. Many actresses had specially come for Eric's birthday. In addition, this was New York and not Los Angeles. The crew was shooting a movie. It was almost impossible to keep many things a secret. However, the first person to be dug up by the paparazzi was not Nicole, Julia, and other actresses who had specially left the set to celebrate Eric's birthday. Instead, it was Joanna Pacula who had just appeared beside Eric. After all, Joanna's appearance was not inferior to any of the actresses who had a scandal with Eric. Under the powerful digging attack of the paparazzi, Joanna's personal details quickly appeared in the media. For a time, the girl's limelight in the media directly overshadowed many A-list actresses. Her fame skyrocketed. Due to the strong curiosity of the public about Joanna, the production company that owned the copyright of the girl's previous movies timely released videos of Joanna Pacula's acting in the movies. In the following period, they made a lot of money. As for the public opinion, Eric did not let anyone make any response. Instead, he strengthened the security of the Ghost crew. Anyway, the movie would be completed in half a month at most. Many of the scenes were indoor scenes. Therefore, there were many paparazzi around the crew every day. However, the filming was not affected much. Charlie Walker sat on the sofa in the living room of Eric's room. He stared at the closed bedroom door and let his imagination run wild. He was the agent that ICM, International Innovation Management Company, had arranged for Joanna Pacula. Due to the media hype these days, Charlie Walker had received many offers for Joanna Pacula to act in movies. Among them, there were a few big-budget movies from the 7 major movie companies. Charlie Walker, who was originally in Los Angeles, called here excitedly, but he didn't even manage to contact his client. Only Eric's assistant, Alan Fissman, told him that Eric had told him to reject all calls. Of course, Charlie Walker was not willing to accept the fact that he had turned down so many offers. One had to know that Warner Brothers had offered him a salary of $1 million for a movie. As Joanna's agent, this meant that he would get a commission of $100,000. This amount of money was a lot for Charlie Walker, who only had a few second-tier actors under him. Although Charlie Walker also realized that Eric was likely to personally support this beautiful Polish girl, he was not going to do anything about it. But Eric's movie had not been completed yet, and there was no sign of his next movie. He felt that if he let Joanna Pacula take on a movie first, there would be no problem with her schedule. 7 to 8 minutes later, the bedroom door finally opened. After changing out of the dirty clothes that he had spent the whole day on the set, Eric was wearing a simple white shirt and casual pants. Joanna Pacula was holding a few clothes and following behind Eric. Seeing the two of them coming out, Charlie Walker quickly stood up and greeted the two of them with a smile. Eric and Charlie Walker shook hands, while Joanna just nodded at her agent. Then, she turned to Eric and said, "You guys can talk, I'll help you wash your clothes." While the agent was stunned, the girl turned around and left the room. After the door closed, Charlie Walker looked at Eric with strong envy. If he had such a beautiful girl to wash his clothes and cook for him, It would be worth it even if he had to give up 10 years of his life. I'm sorry, are you Mr. Walker? Eric gestured for his agent to sit down and asked doubtfully. Of course, Charlie Walker did not dare to be angry because Eric did not remember his surname. He quickly nodded and handed his name card to Eric respectfully. Yes, Mr. Williams. I'm Charlie Walker. This is my name card. Eric took the name card and looked at it. Although he did not care much, Eric still put the name card into his shirt pocket politely. Then, he said to his agent, Mr. Walker, I remember that I asked Alan to reply to you. Charlie Walker nodded. Yes, Mr. Williams. However, I think it's best to let Ms. Pakula read the script personally. It would be a pity if she gave up directly. After the agent finished speaking, he took out a thick stack of about 7 to 8 scripts from his official bag and placed it in front of Eric on the coffee table. Since he had nothing to do, Eric casually flipped through the scripts. Charlie Walker looked at Eric nervously and expectantly. Because of the continuous success of Eric's movies, everyone in the Hollywood industry knew that he had a good eye for scripts. If Eric nodded, even if he did not choose the one with the highest salary, he could use the excuse that Eric was interested in this movie to bargain with the production company. He believed that the other party would be willing to give a satisfactory price. After spending more than 10 minutes, Eric went through the scripts in front of him. He mainly looked at the outline of the story. If he was interested, he would simply flip through the content. However, after going through the 7 to 8 scripts, Eric did not see any movie script that he had an impression of. Moreover, the content of the scripts in front of him did not make his eyes light up. Gently shaking his head, Eric did not mind letting Joanna take it if there was a good script among them. I'm sorry, Mr. Walker. None of them worked. I think you might have made a wasted trip. Charlie Walker was disappointed. He said unwillingly, Mr. Williams, I think that Tremble is not good enough. Moreover, Warner offered a salary of $1 million USD. Why don't you let Ms. Pakula try? $1 million, Eric repeated. He picked out the script that Charlie Walker mentioned and looked at the note. It was indeed a script sent by Warner. The budget was about $30 million US. It was a story about a wife who had to take risks to fight for the custody of her daughter after she divorced her rogue husband. Chapter 337. Eric had just glanced at the outline of the story and put the script aside. When he heard that Warner had offered a salary of $1 million, Eric read the script again in detail. Mr. Walker, I don't see any good points in this movie. To be honest, the story is a little messy, and the theme of the story is a little vague. The description of kinship is very weak. Instead, a lot of ink is used to exaggerate the details of the heroine working with criminals to raise money. Although the description of the change in the heroine's heart is barely outstanding, these words have diluted the theme of the mother-daughter relationship that the author wanted to express. Or rather, the author wants to express both themes. But if that's the case, it will be more complicated. After reading the script, Eric commented subconsciously. Charlie Walker listened carefully to Eric's comments on the script. There were not many opportunities like this. He believed that any producer from the 7 major film companies would be willing to pay a lot of money to listen to Eric's advice on the script. Although Charlie Walker was only an agent now, it was not certain in the future. It was very common for agents to become producers or executives in film companies. It could even be said that an agent who did not want to be a producer was not a good agent. After Eric finished speaking, Charlie Walker nodded and said, Mr. Williams, what you said makes sense. However, this movie hasn't started filming yet. I believe that as long as you make a call, Warner will definitely be very willing to cooperate with you to modify the script. Eric smiled at Charlie Walker and said, That's for sure. However, I have no obligation to guide Warner to modify the script. It's getting late. Mr. Walker, I think you should go back. Of course, Charlie Walker was not willing to give up. With a salary of $1 million, his commission alone would be more than $100,000. Moreover, as long as Joanna's fame spread, his salary would be even higher in the future. Mr. Williams, why don't you listen to Miss Pakula's opinion? After all, this is a salary of $1 million. How many actresses in Hollywood can get such a salary? My opinion is Joan's opinion, Mr. Walker. Eric stood up and gestured for him to leave. Charlie Walker put away the script and stood up helplessly. He couldn't help but say, Mr. Williams, if you like Miss Pakula, you should think more about her. She's an actress. She should be filming a movie, not helping you wash clothes. Eric raised an eyebrow. Mr. Walker, if you feel that this is unfair, I can immediately call ICM and have Mr. Marvin Joseph find someone to replace you. When Charlie Walker heard this, he suddenly realized that he was a little impulsive. Eric's current status was not something a small agent like him could challenge. I'm sorry, I lost my composure. Mr. Williams, I'll go back first. It's okay. Eric waved his hand. Mr. Walker, Joan will become an A-list celebrity sooner or later, but she needs patience. I think so. After saying goodbye, Charlie Walker picked up his briefcase and left Eric's room. When Charlie Walker walked to the elevator, he saw Joanna Pakula walking out of the elevator with a few pieces of washed clothes. Oh, it's you, Mr. Walker. Are you leaving? Joanna saw Charlie Walker and greeted him. Charlie Walker looked at the beautiful woman and wanted to say something to instigate her. But when he thought of what Eric said just now, he quickly gave up the idea. If his instigation was successful, Eric would definitely settle the score with him. At that time, it was uncertain who Joanna's agent would be, not to mention the commission from the movie's salary. Yes, Miss Pakula. We've finished our discussion. Charlie Walker nodded and took out a business card from his pocket. He handed it to the woman. By the way, this is my business card. There are all kinds of ways to contact me. If you need any help, you can contact me at any time. Joanna Pakula took the business card and put it in her pocket. She pointed to Eric's room and said, I'll go back first. Then, goodbye. Another elevator door opened. Charlie Walker quickly walked in and waved at Joanna. When the woman returned to the room, she saw Eric sitting on the sofa with a sketch pad on his knees. He was holding a pencil and drawing on it quickly. When he looked up and saw Joanna walking in, Eric said, Actually, you can just leave these things to the hotel staff. Didn't you say that you don't like the smell of their laundry detergent? The woman walked to Eric and sat down on the sofa. She took out a shirt from her arms and showed it to Eric. Smell it. It smells like lemon. Eric lowered his head and sniffed the shirt. Then, he changed his target and moved closer to the woman's neck. It smells good. Joanna shrunk her neck and wanted to push the man away. However, Eric threw away the sketch pad on his knees and hugged the woman to fall on the sofa. Eric, don't do it here. I don't think I locked the door just now. It was so embarrassing when Drew saw it a few days ago. Eric didn't go overboard. He just hugged Joanna and kissed her on the face. He said, I just rejected all the scripts that were sent to your manager, including one with a salary of $1 million USD. Joanna's expression froze. Her eyes flickered a few times, but she soon relaxed. If it wasn't for Eric, she wouldn't have been invited even if it was $100,000 US, let alone a salary of $1 million USD. Although she missed out on $1 million USD and felt disappointed, Joanna quickly adjusted her position. She knew that Eric was her biggest support. Eric, I'll listen to your arrangement. The woman didn't hesitate for too long and said quickly. Eric couldn't help but kiss the woman's beautiful eyes. He felt her long eyelashes trembling and said, That's $1 million USD. Are you really not angry? Joanna only opened her eyes when she felt the man's lips leave her eyes. She looked at Eric's slightly teasing expression. There was a trace of grievance and coquettishness in her voice. She honestly said, I'm angry. That's $1 million USD. I feel a little uncomfortable. Eric could also see that Joanna wasn't really angry. He smiled and said, Wow, that's too serious. Let me take a look for you. I have experience in this area. Chapter 338. At the end of May, Ghost officially wrapped up filming in Manhattan. Eric brought the crew back to Los Angeles to start post-production. At the same time, as North American schools began their holidays, the 1990 summer break officially arrived. On May 25, Universal Pictures' Back to the Future 3 and Disney's Firebird Strikes were released in more than 2,000 theaters. The production of Back to the Future 3 was quite rushed. After all, Back to the Future 2 was released at the end of last year. As for the reason, it was almost exactly the same as when Columbia rebooted the Ghostbusters franchise after 5 years. The acquisition negotiations between Universal's parent company, MCA, and the Matsushita Consortium had entered the final stage. In order to sell MCA for a good price, Universal Pictures needed better performance support. Because of the tight schedule, even though Back to the Future 3 was produced by Spielberg and directed by Robert Zemeckis, the movie was criticized by a large number of film critics. Even with the support of a large number of die-hard fans, it only grossed US $19 million in the first 3 days. However, compared to another movie released at the same time, the results of Back to the Future 3 could only be described as brilliant. That was Disney's Firebird Attack. This was a story about a US Apache helicopter pilot. Compared to the controversy caused by the quality of Back to the Future 3, Firebird Attack immediately became a dud after a lot of publicity. It didn't cause much of a splash. This movie was very similar to Tom Cruise's famous film that had earned $350 million at the box office. Therefore, when it was occasionally mentioned by film critics in the newspapers, it only received the comment of a clumsy imitation of Top Gun. Similarly, Firebird Strikes Out only received a measly $6 million at the box office. This box office result made the theater managers who had signed a 2 to 3 week release contract with Disney complain. After 3 weeks, this $30 million movie would face the fate of being removed from the theaters. Including the distribution cost, this movie would bring Disney at least $30 million in losses. Eric should have been very happy that Disney's first summer break was a dud. However, because of the male lead of this movie, Eric couldn't be happy. This was because the male lead of this $3,000 movie was Nicolas Cage, the male lead of Eric's version of Ghost. On the morning of May 29th, when Eric and the several main creators of Ghost walked out of the Los Angeles airport, they were stopped by a large group of paparazzi. They all asked Eric for his opinion on Firebird Strikes. Eric woke up early in the morning to catch a flight back to Los Angeles. He didn't know anything about Firebird Strikes, so how could he have any opinions? In addition, the paparazzi's questions were full of traps, so it was impossible for Eric to respond rashly. He could only silently leave in a hurry under the protection of his bodyguards. However, his silence clearly wasn't a good solution. The next day, the tabloids had news of Williams being questioned about Firebird Strikes with a cold expression. The article went from Eric to Nicolas Cage, and very quickly, it shifted its focus to Ghost, which was in its final stages. It just so happened that the rushed production of Back to the Future 3 led to an unsatisfactory box office. Many media outlets began to question the quality of Ghost. While the matter was in an uproar, Eric had already left Los Angeles for San Francisco. After all, this kind of thing could only be handled by Firefly and Disney's publicity department. Eric only needed to let the agent make some statements. Disney had just experienced a box office failure, so they definitely wouldn't take Ghost lightly. Although Los Angeles wasn't too far from San Francisco, and it only took more than an hour by plane, Eric hadn't been here for more than a year because he had been busy. The last time he came was for the acquisition of Pixar. Over the past year, Eric had given John Lasseter full authority over the affairs of Pixar. The two of them communicated over the phone most of the time. Even if they needed to discuss things in person, John Lasseter would go to Los Angeles. Because of Eric's investment without hesitation, Pixar was no longer the shabby animation studio that hid in a small building in San Francisco Bay more than a year ago. At this time, the headquarters of Pixar had moved to a small town called Amolaville near Berkeley. The number of employees had also increased to more than 300, and the team of engineers specializing in providing technical support for 3D animation production had more than 100 people. Compared to the size of Pixar when it was first acquired, the current team could be described as extravagant. John, compared to Steve Jobs, I'm like an angel, right? Eric hugged John Lasseter, who walked out of the Pixar office building to greet him, and this was Eric's first sentence. Of course, Eric, let's go in. John Lasseter knew that Eric was joking with him. After shaking hands with Alan and Joanna, who were behind Eric, John Lasseter said, Of course, Eric, let's go in. Eric followed John Lasseter into the office building and pretended to be unhappy as he said, But, I only promised to invest $30 million in Toy Story. But now, you've already spent close to $30 million, and I haven't even seen the shadow of an animated film. Even though John Lasseter knew that Eric wasn't blaming him, he was still a little embarrassed. The first Toy Story in his previous life was completed under extremely difficult circumstances, so the cost was only $30 million, and many details were quite rough. After receiving sufficient financial support from Eric, John Lasseter's perfectionist tendencies as an artist made it almost certain that the budget would be overspent. Therefore, the animation was only 2/3 complete, but the cost was close to $30 million. Fortunately, John Lasseter wasn't as reckless as Cameron. After all, he didn't have 100% confidence in 3D animation. In order to minimize the impact and losses caused by failure in the future, John Lasseter was very restrained in spending funds. In his previous life, because of the success of the first Toy Story, the cost of the second Toy Story directly soared to $100 million, and the cost of the third Toy Story was as high as $200 million. It could be seen that, in the pursuit of perfection, John Lasseter was the same type of person as James Cameron. He was just not as crazy as Cameron. Chapter 339. Although the studio had undergone tremendous changes in the past year, the working style of Pixar's employees had not changed at all. They were still as casual as Eric had seen them a year ago. When he passed by the office, a young female employee recognized Eric and called out a group of sisters to ask for a few autographs. Other than that, Eric's arrival did not cause much of a reaction. In a screening room, Eric, John Lasseter, and a few other people in charge of Pixar watched the completed version of Toy Story. Although there was no sound, the completed footage was still very interesting. At least, Joanna, who was sitting next to Eric, watched it with great interest from beginning to end. Compared to the original version in her memory, this version of Toy Story had indeed improved greatly in terms of details. The graphics were more detailed and realistic, and the movements of the toys were more agile. After watching the completed film, Eric chatted with John Lasseter for a while. After confirming the finished product, John Lasseter finally asked, Eric, I think you didn't come here today just to see the success of our production, right? Eric smiled and pointed to Pixar's CTO, who was sitting next to John Lasseter. Of course. Actually, I'm here to see Mr. Ed Kamal. Ed Kamal had never been very interested. If it were not for Eric's identity as the big boss, Ed Kamal would have long gone into his office to research technology. Compared to socializing, he preferred to work. Seeing Eric suddenly pointing at him, Ed Kamal recovered from a technical problem. You're looking for me? Yes, let's go to the conference room, Eric said as he stood up. The group moved into the conference room. Eric sat down at the head of the table, and Alan took out a stack of documents from his official bag and distributed them to Ed Kamal and John Lasseter. Mr. Stan Winston was supposed to come, but he was tied up with some matters, so I had to come here as an outsider. Although I've read some information before, if there's anything unrealistic, you can tell me at any time. Hearing Eric's solemn words, Ed Kamal and John Lasseter nodded solemnly. Eric quickly added, This is a plan that I came up with Stan's help during the filming of Ghost. It's a software engineering plan for special effects. You can take a look at it first, and we'll talk about it later. Only then did Ed Kamal and John Lasseter open the documents that Alan had just given them. As they read through the documents, John Lasseter was slightly better, but Ed Kamal had a shocked expression. He had a Ph.D. in computer technology, so he had a deeper understanding of the scale of Eric's plan after thinking about it a little. In the document, Eric proposed a plan that Ed Kamal thought was somewhat unrealistic. He hoped to create a top technical team to engineer the computer special effects technology used in future movies. Generally speaking, in a movie that used computer special effects, the film director would encounter a problem. For example, if he wanted a living person to melt like a heated candle, then the computer special effects engineers would specially develop the corresponding program code to solve this problem. Under normal circumstances, after solving this problem, the code would become useless data. In Eric's vision, he did hope to further process this useless data into a set of fixed software. If they encountered the same kind of special effects problem again, they could use it directly. Although many movies now began to use computers to create special effects, in general, computer special effects were still in the era of model special effects. Therefore, Eric's plan, in Ed Kamal's opinion, was very unrealistic and extremely wasteful. After all, to develop the corresponding program code to solve the special effects problem was already quite time-consuming. If it were to be processed into software, it would be even more of a waste of time and money. Moreover, whether the processed software could still be used in the future was a very big problem. The two of them finished reading Eric's plan in detail, then raised their heads. Eric shrugged. "Okay, if you have any questions, just ask." "John, you first." "Eric, I think that this is completely unnecessary. It's too wasteful." John Lasseter expressed his opinion very bluntly. "Ed, what about you?" "My opinion is the same as John's. It's a very wasteful thing." Ed Kamal said, "Take Toy Story, for example. In order to solve the problem of making Cowboy Woody's facial expressions more realistic, our team spent a month writing the corresponding program code to solve this problem. However, if you wanted to make this set of code into software, the time consumed would definitely exceed the time spent writing the code. Moreover, after the software was made into software, it would need to be upgraded and maintained along with the upgrade of the computer hardware. This was another expense. And it's hard to say whether this software can be used again in the future. Even if Toy Story has a sequel, it can only be used 3 or 4 times at most, or maybe 4 or 5 times. Eric nodded. "I understand what you mean, but I have already given a solution to this point in the plan. We will set up a very professional evaluation team to evaluate the usability of the special effects program. We will classify the code programs developed by the technical staff to solve the special effects problem, and then choose the most likely program to be used in the future to be software engineered." John Lasseter still asked, "Eric, I want to know, why are you doing this?" "There are still very few movies that use computer special effects, and compared to computer special effects, model special effects are much cheaper, and most of the time, they are much more realistic. I really can't think of any studio that would give up cheap and realistic model special effects, and instead use expensive computer special effects that don't have very good effects." Eric said, "Because I have a hunch that computer special effects will become the mainstream of film and television special effects in the future. I can't prove my statement now, but it won't be long before James Cameron's Terminator 2 and my Jurassic Park projects are completed. You will definitely understand this point." Chapter 340. John Lasseter and Ed Kamal were obsessed with making 3D animation because they had a good feeling about the future of this form of animation. Hearing that Eric was optimistic about the future of computer special effects, the two of them could not think of any reason to refute him. After all, the 3D animation that the two of them insisted on had not achieved any results yet, and Eric's vision in movies had been proven through many movies. After saying so much, Eric laid out the detailed plan in front of Ed Kamal. Ed Kamal also realized Eric's intentions. Although he was now making 3D animation was still a type of computer CG special effects. When Ed Kamal was at Lucasfilm, he was responsible for the computer CG scenes in Star Wars. Therefore, it was obvious that Eric wanted him to be in charge of this team. Of course, John Lasseter also realized this, and his expression was one of worry. After working together for so long, the two of them had a tacit understanding of each other. If Eric transferred Ed Kamal to be in charge of the computer special effects department in the digital domain, what would happen to Pixar? "Eric, you have to know that although most of the technical problems with Toy Story have been solved, Pixar still can't do without Ed." Eric nodded. "I understand your concerns, John. I have no intention of asking Ed to leave Pixar. I just plan to set up a technical team that specializes in computer special effects and software engineering. Ed is not only an outstanding computer technologist, but he is also more familiar with computer special effects than most of the special effects personnel in Hollywood. After all, he started working with computer special effects more than 10 years ago, so I hope that he can be the chief technical officer of the digital domain and lead this team. Ed Kamal's mind was racing as Eric and John Lasseter talked. Now that he heard Eric's arrangement for him, he began to feel tempted. From Eric's plan, Ed Kamal could sense Eric's ambition in computer special effects. Although he still had doubts about the prospects of Eric's plan, it did not hinder his understanding of this huge plan. Once the development of film and television special effects went in the direction that Eric said, then the digital domain, which was more focused on computer special effects research than any other special effects company, would undoubtedly become the industry's leader. Moreover, there was also the plan of software engineering for special effects processing. Although this plan would consume a lot of manpower and financial resources, once it accumulated to a certain extent, the digital domain would undoubtedly become the overlord of the special effects industry, and its position would be unshakable. This was because when a latecomer to the film and television special effects field faced with a special effects problem, but found that the digital domain already had a detailed special effects software that could solve the problem, then, would they choose to build a technical team of dozens or hundreds of people to reinvent the solution, or buy the software directly from the digital domain? The answer was obvious. After pondering for a moment and noticing the expression on his partner John Lasseter's face, Ed Kamal, who had originally planned to agree, said, "Eric, I hope that the headquarters of the Digital Domain Technology Research Team can be set up in San Francisco. That way, I can take care of Pixar. Moreover, although Los Angeles is the base of the film industry, San Francisco, with Silicon Valley, can attract the best computer technology talent." Eric nodded and said, "Of course, that was my original plan. Even setting up the team headquarters in Amoraville is fine. Perhaps we can even be neighbors with Pixar." They spent a few more hours discussing the details. The specific plans still needed to be discussed by Stan Winston and Ed Kamal. After leaving Pixar and getting into the Chevrolet commercial vehicle, Eric breathed a sigh of relief. Another important chess piece had been placed. No one knew the development trend of film and television special effects better than he did. Computer special effects would become the mainstream of film and television special effects in the future. Even Industrial Light and Magic, which had started with model special effects, closed down the model special effects department that had created many of the virtual characters in Star Wars after the new era and focused mainly on digital special effects. Moreover, the reason why Eric insisted on the software engineering of the special effects solution was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. Instead, it was made after careful consideration. This plan stemmed from Eric's understanding of another development trend in the film and television special effects industry. After the new era, with the rapid development of computer technology, the barriers to entering the film and television special effects industry became lower and lower. Film and television special effects companies sprung up all over the world like bamboo shoots after a spring rain. Under these circumstances, the original film and television special effects giants' living conditions became worse and worse. In order to compete with Hollywood's original special effects giants, other states in the United States, and even other countries outside of the United States, implemented high tax rebates and other financial support for special effects companies. Under this cruel competition, Hollywood's veteran special effects companies went bankrupt one after another. Of course, Eric would not allow the digital domain's bankruptcy to happen again. He also had no intention of saving the entire film and television special effects industry. As a film producer, his economic interests were at odds with those of the film and television special effects companies. Eric's plan was to be ahead of other special effects companies in terms of technology accumulation and software engineering of commonly used special effects solutions. Finally, by selling special effects solutions and software, not only would the digital domain maintain an absolute lead in the film and television special effects industry, but he also hoped that the digital domain would become the oligarch of the film and television special effects industry, forming a technological monopoly. This idea was not impossible because computer special effects had just started to emerge. The big special effects companies were still the nobles in the film industry. If a film company wanted to make a special effects movie, there were not many special effects companies to choose from. Under these circumstances, the digital domain would definitely not lack special effects movie projects. As long as they were willing to invest, the digital domain would accumulate enough special effects solutions. 10 years later, when the barriers to entry in the film and television special effects industry were lowered, the latecomer special effects factories would realize that the digital domain already had mature special effects software for many of the special effects technologies that needed to be developed. Then, these companies would definitely choose to buy the software instead of spending a lot of money to develop it themselves. What? We don't have the software you want? Don't worry, we have a strong technical team. As long as you pay the right amount, the digital domain can quickly and cheaply develop the technology you want. This is much cheaper than raising a technical team yourself, isn't it? Like many other industries, once a monopoly was formed, it was very difficult to break it. In his previous life, Industrial Light and Magic originally had this potential because in the early 1990s, when computer special effects became popular, Industrial Light and Magic dominated the film and television special effects industry. If the 7 major film companies wanted to make films with excellent special effects, their first choice would always be Industrial Light and Magic. Unfortunately, after the success of the Star Wars trilogy, George Lucas had a huge fortune that he could not spend in his lifetime. He did not have the ambition to develop Industrial Light and Magic into a giant. Chapter 341. Eric's business car left Amoraville, where Pixar was located, and came to downtown San Francisco through the Bay Bridge of Highway 80. Their destination was the set of Instinct near Pacific Heights in San Francisco. Pacific Heights, near San Francisco's Fortress Park, was the most expensive residential area in San Francisco. Several scenes in Instinct were shot here. Eric came to the shooting site on Broadway Street in Pacific Heights according to the address provided by Jeffrey. As soon as he got out of the car, he saw dozens of heavily armed riot police outside a mansion that was cordoned off. As soon as they got out of the car, Jeffrey greeted them. "Jeffrey, isn't this a bit exaggerated?" Eric pointed to the group of riot police and asked. Although he heard some things here when he was shooting Ghost in New York, he still felt a little surprised when he saw the situation on the scene. Jeffrey smiled bitterly. "Eric, let's go in first. If someone finds out that you are here, there will probably be trouble again. To be honest, I advise you not to write such a script in the future." After taking Eric and others into the shooting site, Jeffrey explained, San Francisco is originally the stronghold of gay people in North America. After some plot details of Instinct were revealed last time, the gay organizations in San Francisco felt that the movie was suspected of discriminating against homosexuals. During this period, there were 4 protests with more than 100 people. In order to prevent some radical homosexuals from forcibly obstructing the shooting, we have to be more careful. Eric walked side by side with Jeffrey. After listening to Jeffrey, he asked, "What does the San Francisco County government think?" Jeffrey pointed to the riot police outside. "Look at them. We invested more than $30 million in this movie, most of which was spent in San Francisco. This is a big tax income for the San Francisco County government. Coupled with the donation I mentioned to you before, they can't see any accidents happening to the crew. However, the riot police can only prevent the excessive behavior of homosexuals. They can't forcibly disperse the other party." "That's good." Eric nodded in satisfaction. When they arrived at the filming location, they saw several staff members guarding outside a door. They're filming the scene where Catherine Chume kills Johnny Bartz. It's been cleared. Jeffrey had just explained when the bedroom door was opened. "Quick, someone has fainted. Help carry him out," the staff member said anxiously and immediately returned to the bedroom. The floor supervisors who were guarding outside also went in. Eric and Jeffrey looked at each other and looked into the bedroom worriedly. "Because this scene is too bloody, in order to prevent anyone from fainting, we specially arranged a doctor in advance. So don't worry, there won't be any problems," Jeffrey explained. Eric remembered the scene in his memory and nodded. The filming scene suddenly turned into a bloody murder scene. Even if they knew it was fake, it was inevitable that they would be stimulated. Eric was thinking about whether to go in and take a look. A middle-aged man in a white coat with his eyes closed and a pale face was lying on a stretcher. He was hurriedly carried out by several staff members. "This is the doctor we arranged?" Jeffrey muttered to himself in disbelief. Eric saw this scene, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He looked at Jeffrey and wanted to laugh but didn't dare to. After all, laughing in this situation would be too rude. However, in the face of the bloody scene, the filming crew did not have any accidents, but the doctor responsible for dealing with the accident fainted. This scene was a bit funny. "I'm sorry, Mr. Williams, there was an accident, Director Roger." Spottywood quickly walked out and shook hands with Eric. "It's okay. Then, can I go in and take a look?" "Of course," Roger nodded. Seeing Joanna Pakula behind Eric, Roger said, "I suggest this lady not go in. Although the room has been preliminarily cleaned, it's still a bit horrible." "Joan, you can wait outside," Eric said to the girl and followed Roger Spottywood into the bedroom. This was a very spacious European-style bedroom. According to the settings in the script, there was a large mirror on the ceiling. At this time, several staff members were cleaning up the bloody mess. Of course, it was not real blood, but it was not ketchup either. It looked quite realistic. The female lead, Diane Lane, quickly came out of the bathroom next door. She was still wearing a large white bathrobe. Seeing Eric appear, the girl walked forward with some surprise in her eyes. "Mr. Williams. Hello. I didn't expect you to come today. Mr. Spottywood didn't tell me." Eric shook hands with Diane Lane and said with a smile, "It seems that the scene just now did not cause any discomfort to Mississippi Lane. This is really a good thing. I just saw the doctor being carried out." Diane Lane, who was originally full of smiles, thought of something and put away the smile on her face without a trace. She said, "Actually, I also felt very uncomfortable just now. I even felt like vomiting, but I just washed my face with cold water and felt better." Roger Spottywood looked at the lying woman strangely. Just at the end of the scene, when the doctor who was guarding nearby rolled his eyes and fainted, Diane Lane was so amused that she laughed. If the scene had not been completed, maybe they would have to do it again. However, Roger Spottywood had no intention of exposing such a trivial matter. Eric nodded. Hearing the sound of water in the bathroom, he asked curiously, "Is there someone else in there?" "Yes, Mr. Cabell is washing the stains on his body." If this kind of artificial blood is not washed off immediately, it will be difficult to get it off the skin after it dries, Roger Spottywood said. "There are curtains inside. I just washed my hands," Diane Lane explained. Eric looked around and saw that the staff had begun to move the filming equipment outside. He suddenly asked, "By the way, I remember that the next scene should be the police investigation of the scene?" Roger Spottywood explained, "In order to arrange the schedule of some supporting roles, that scene has been finished in advance." "Then what next?" Eric asked again. Roger Spottywood asked for the shooting schedule from his assistant and handed it to Eric. "Next, we have to go to Catherine Chume's villa to shoot a few sets of scenes. It's not far from here. It's just nearby on Vallejo Street." Chapter 342. After staying on the set of Instinct for an afternoon and checking on the progress of the movie, Eric stayed at the hotel where the Instinct crew was staying that night. The crew also held a small cocktail party and invited everyone to attend. Eric was very satisfied with the progress of the Instinct shooting, so he no longer wasted time on the set. The next morning, Eric left the Instinct crew and went to Cisco's headquarters in San Jose, south of San Francisco Bay, to attend a small high-level regular meeting. Then, he hurried back to Los Angeles. Less than 2 days after leaving Los Angeles, he received no less than 10 calls urging him to go back. Most of them were internal affairs of Firefly, which made Eric's resentment towards Robert Shea even deeper. As the CEO of Firefly, these things should have been handled by Robert Shea. Firefly's current affairs were not complicated. As long as he put in some effort, these things could be taken care of in an orderly manner. However, to Eric's disappointment, Robert Shea put more energy into Sleeping with the Enemy, which he personally served as the producer. Robert Shea personally handled all the distribution affairs of Sleeping with the Enemy. It was estimated that this was the only project in Firefly Films that Eric did not have to worry about. If it weren't for the fact that Eric was very satisfied with the movie after watching the preliminary edited sample, he would probably have fallen out with Robert Shea. It was normal for the executives of major Hollywood film companies to stabilize their positions and strive for more benefits through successful film projects. Therefore, it was not difficult to understand why Robert Shea attached so much importance to Sleeping with the Enemy. However, Robert Shea's behavior was completely contrary to Eric's plan. What he didn't know was that if he could devote himself to the management of the company, then he would definitely become one of the most powerful people in Hollywood in the future. However, Robert Shea wanted to prove himself by making movies. He wanted to seize the power that did not belong to him. This behavior made Eric more and more intolerable. On the plane to Los Angeles, Eric frowned, thinking about how to solve Firefly's current situation. Joanna Pakula's soft voice came into his ears. "Eric, do you want something to drink?" Eric looked to the side and saw a blonde air stewardess smiling at him with a small cart in front of her. Eric glanced at the dazzling variety of drink names, shook his head, and said to the stewardess, "If there is purified water, just give me a glass of purified water." The golden-haired stewardess nodded and poured a glass of water for Eric. Eric reached out to take it, and his arm passed by Joanna. The girl subconsciously shrank back, as if she wanted to melt into the seat. After the stewardess left, Eric helplessly said, "Joan, can you relax a little? I'm not a tiger. I didn't do it on purpose last night. I drank a little too much, so I lost my composure." Joanna Pakula's face blushed. She recalled the scene last night, and her cheeks could not help but heat up slightly. It was a small cocktail party held by the crew of Basic Instinct for Eric's arrival. Joanna felt a little tired, and she did not know many people, so she left early. But when she left, Eric directly put his room card in her hand, and the girl took it obediently. After returning to Eric's suite, Joanna quickly fell asleep after taking a shower. Not knowing how long had passed, Joanna heard some strange sounds coming from the living room outside the bedroom. At first, she thought that Eric had come back, so she did not pay much attention to it. After being in a daze for a while, Joanna did not see Eric coming into the bedroom. Then she realized that something was wrong. Barefoot, she carefully opened the bedroom door and looked into the living room outside. The scene in the living room shocked her. What happened next made Joanna panic. She wanted to pretend that she did not see anything and go back, but she accidentally made some noise in the process. Eric was having fun. When he heard the noise in the bedroom, he was a little confused. But fortunately, Eric was not too drunk. He quickly remembered that he had told Joanna to wait for him in his bedroom during the cocktail party. Realizing this, Eric quickly sent the woman away. When he returned to the bedroom and saw Joanna's situation, he comforted her and made her relax. However, Joanna would not be able to forget what happened last night for a long time. At this moment, hearing the apology in Eric's voice, Joanna bit her lower lip. After a while, she finally asked in a low voice, "Eric, would you do that to me?" Eric shook his head and said, "Of course not. They wanted to please me. I was just playing with them. You are my woman." Joanna knew that Eric was telling the truth. This kind of thing was very common in Hollywood. Over the years, Joanna had received similar hints. If she had been able to put down her persistence and integrate into the rules of Hollywood, she would not have been in the United States for 10 years without achieving anything. However, the woman could not help but complain softly, "So I am just your woman, not your lover." Eric reached out and hugged the woman. "If I say lover, you must think that I am hypocritical, right?" According to Eric's mental age, it was difficult for him to fall in love at first sight. Joanna was obviously not the kind of little girl who liked to fantasize. Joanna obediently leaned on Eric and murmured in a low voice, "Don't you know that women are very willing to be deceived?" Eric said, "It takes a lot of brain power to lie. You know that I am very busy and don't have much time to think about this kind of thing. I've already arranged your future for you. As long as you want, you'll become a big star in Hollywood." You'll be paid millions for each movie and you'll even win an Oscar. In the future, if you're tired and don't want to act anymore, you can change your career to another one. We can also have a few children and watch them grow up day by day. Then, they will become heartless and try to seize our property." When Joanna heard the last sentence of Eric's words, she could not help laughing and said, "It seems that except for love and marriage." Eric shook his head gently and seemed to be a little emotional. He said, "Love and marriage are very unreliable, especially in the United States. Do you know the two women last night?" Joanna nodded her head. Eric continued, "Diana Lynn, who played the role of Catherine, her parents divorced 13 days after she was born. Jenny Triplehorn, who played the role of Beth, her parents divorced when she was 3 years old. You see, this is the true portrayal of the life experience of many stars in Hollywood. Except for the two of them, many people I know basically grew up in broken single-parent families. There are not many families that can maintain a complete marriage for a long time." "Eric, what about you?" Joanna heard Eric's words and asked subconsciously. Eric thought about it and did not hide it. He said casually, "I don't even know who my mother is." Joanna's arm tightened around Eric's arm and did not ask any more questions. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.